How to increase memory power and concentration in studies. 49 proven tips with real world examples. Your complete guide to academic excellence and peak mental performance. Introduction, memory, and concentration are the twin pillars upon which all academic success is built. Whether you're a high school student preparing for board examinations, a college undergraduate tackling a demanding curriculum, or a lifelong learner picking up a new professional skill, the ability to absorb, retain, and recall information efficiently is what separates those who merely attend classes from those who truly master the material. Yet, despite its importance, memory training is rarely taught in schools. Students are expected to remember vast quantities of information but are seldom given the tools to do so effectively. The good news is that memory is not a fixed trait. Decades of neuroscience research have shown that the human brain is remarkably plastic. It can be retrained, strengthened, and optimized at any age. The techniques presented in this book are grounded in peer reviewed research and have been validated by cognitive psychologists, neuroscientists, and educators around the world. From nutrition and sleep to mnemonic systems and mindfulness, every tip in this collection is designed to give you a practical, evidence based strategy for supercharging your study sessions. This audiobook is organized into 6 thematic sections. The first section covers brain health basics, the physiological foundations that must be in place before any advanced technique can work. The second section presents core study techniques that transform passive reading into active learning. The third section introduces memory systems, ancient and modern methods that allow you to memorize lists, sequences, and complex information with astonishing speed. The fourth section focuses on concentration and focus, addressing the epidemic of distraction that plagues modern students. The fifth section covers environmental optimization, how to set up your physical space for peak cognitive performance. The sixth section introduces advanced techniques for those who want to push their mental abilities to the next level. Each of the 49 tips includes a detailed explanation, a real world example or case study, a science insight that explains why the technique works, and a key takeaway that summarizes the most important point. By the time you finish this audiobook, you will have a comprehensive toolkit of memory and concentration strategies that you can begin using immediately. Let us begin this journey toward peak mental performance. Your brain is the most powerful instrument you possess. It is time to learn how to play it like a virtuoso. Section 1, Brain Health, the Foundations of Memory. Tip 1, Eat brain-boosting foods. What you eat has a direct and measurable impact on your brain's ability to learn and remember. The brain consumes roughly 20% of your total caloric intake despite accounting for only 2% of your body weight, making it one of the most energy-hungry organs in the human body. The quality of fuel you provide determines how well it performs. Foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids, particularly DHA docosahexaenoic acid, are essential for building and maintaining the cell membranes of neurons. Without adequate omega-3 intake, the structural integrity of brain cells is compromised, leading to slower signal transmission and poorer memory consolidation. Fatty fish such as salmon, mackerel, and sardines are among the richest sources of DHA. A single serving of wild salmon provides approximately 1,500 milligrams of omega-3s, which is close to the recommended daily intake for cognitive health. Blueberries deserve special mention as a superfood for the brain. They are packed with anthocyanins, a class of flavonoids that cross the blood-brain barrier and accumulate in regions of the brain associated with learning and memory, particularly the hippocampus. Research from the University of Exeter found that participants who consumed blueberry juice daily for 12 weeks showed significant improvements in episodic memory and processing speed compared to a control group. Dark chocolate, when consumed in moderation approximately 20-30 grams per day, provides flavonoids that increase blood flow to the hippocampus and stimulate the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, a protein that supports the growth of new neurons. Nuts and seeds, especially walnuts, almonds, and pumpkin seeds, deliver vitamin E, zinc, and magnesium, all of which play critical roles in synaptic plasticity. Leafy green vegetables such as spinach, kale, and broccoli are rich in folate, vitamin K, and lutein, nutrients that have been linked to slower cognitive decline. A landmark study published in the journal Neurology found that individuals who ate at least one serving of leafy greens per day had cognitive abilities equivalent to someone 11 years younger than those who rarely consumed them. Avoiding certain foods is equally important. Diets high in refined sugar have been shown to impair hippocampal function and reduce the production of BDNF. Ultra-processed foods containing artificial preservatives and trans fats promote neuroinflammation, which damages neurons and disrupts the neural circuits involved in memory and attention. Real-life example: Maria, a third-year medical student at the University of Melbourne, struggled with memory retention during her pathology exams despite studying for 8 hours a day. After consulting with a nutritionist, she overhauled her diet. She replaced her afternoon sugary snacks with a handful of walnuts and blueberries, added grilled salmon to her lunch 3 times a week, and started her mornings with a spinach and avocado smoothie. Within 3 weeks, Maria reported that she could recall lecture material far more easily and felt less mental fatigue during evening study sessions. Her practice test scores improved by 18%, and she attributed the change primarily to her improved nutrition. Science Insight: a 2023 meta-analysis in the journal Nutrients reviewed 127 studies on diet and cognition and concluded that Mediterranean-style diets, rich in fish, olive oil, nuts, fruits, and vegetables, are associated with a 35% lower risk of cognitive impairment and measurable improvements in working memory and executive function. Key takeaway: your brain is a biological organ that requires high quality nutrition. Prioritize omega 3 rich fish, blueberries, dark chocolate, nuts, and leafy greens while minimizing sugar and processed foods. Tip 2: stay hydrated. Water is the most overlooked nutrient in the student's diet, yet it is arguably the most critical for cognitive performance. The brain is approximately 7 to 5% water, and even mild dehydration, the loss of just 1 to 2% of body water, can cause measurable declines in attention, working memory, and short-term recall. When you are dehydrated, the volume of cerebrospinal fluid decreases, which reduces the efficiency of nutrient delivery to brain cells and the removal of metabolic waste products. Blood becomes slightly more viscous, reducing oxygen flow to the brain. These physiological changes manifest as brain fog, difficulty concentrating, and increased mental fatigue. The recommended daily water intake varies by individual, but a practical guideline for students is to drink at least 8 glasses, approximately 2 liters per day, with additional intake during physical activity or hot weather. Importantly, water intake should be distributed throughout the day rather than consumed in large amounts at once. Keeping a reusable water bottle on your desk during study sessions is a simple but effective habit. Coffee and energy drinks are not adequate substitutes for water. While caffeine can temporarily enhance alertness, it is also a mild diuretic that can accelerate fluid loss. Moreover, the sugar crashes associated with many energy drinks can actually impair concentration. Herbal teas and water infused with fruit slices are healthier alternatives that contribute to hydration without the negative side effects. An often overlooked aspect of hydration is its impact on mood. Research from the University of Connecticut found that even mild dehydration in women led to significant increases in fatigue, tension, and anxiety. Since emotional state directly influences cognitive performance, maintaining proper hydration supports both your mood and your memory. Real life example: James, a high school senior preparing for his A-level examinations in the United Kingdom, noticed that his concentration consistently faltered during afternoon study sessions. He assumed the cause was the natural post-lunch energy dip, but when he began tracking his water intake, he discovered he was drinking less than 1 liter per day, well below the recommended amount. He started carrying a 1-liter water bottle and made a habit of refilling it twice during the school day. Within 1 week, James reported that his afternoon study sessions felt significantly more productive. He could sustain focus for longer periods, and the persistent mild headache he had attributed to stress completely disappeared. His test scores in mathematics improved by 12% over the following month. Science Insight: a study published in the British Journal of Nutrition found that dehydration of just 1.36% of body mass impaired working memory and increased anxiety in young men. The effects were reversed within minutes of rehydration, demonstrating the immediate link between water intake and cognitive function. Key takeaway: keep water within arm's reach at all times. Even mild dehydration impairs attention, working memory, and mood. Aim for at least 2 liters per day. Tip 3: get quality sleep. Sleep is not a luxury. It is a biological necessity that plays an indispensable role in memory consolidation. During deep sleep stages 3 and 4 of non-REM sleep, the brain transfers information from short-term storage in the hippocampus to long-term storage in the neocortex. Without sufficient deep sleep, this transfer process is disrupted, and memories formed during the day are effectively lost. The science of sleep and memory is now well established. Dr. Robert Stiggold of Harvard Medical School has shown that students who sleep after learning new material retain significantly more information than those who stay awake for the same period. In one landmark study, participants who slept for 8 hours after learning a sequence of tasks showed a 20 to 30% improvement in performance, while those who remain awake showed no improvement at all. The ideal amount of sleep for most adults is 7 to 9 hours per night. For adolescents, the recommended amount is even higher, 8 to 10 hours. However, it is not just the quantity of sleep that matters, the quality is equally important. Fragmented sleep, frequent awakenings, and sleep disorders such as sleep apnea can dramatically reduce the amount of deep sleep obtained. To optimize sleep quality, establish a consistent sleep schedule, go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, including weekends. The brain's circadian rhythm thrives on regularity. Avoid screens for at least 1 hour before bedtime, as the blue light emitted by phones, tablets, and computers suppresses the production of melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep onset. Create a cool, dark, and quiet sleeping environment. A particularly powerful technique for students is the study sleep study method. Rather than cramming for 5 hours straight, study for 2 hours in the evening, sleep for 8 hours, and then review the material first thing in the morning. This approach leverages the brain's natural consolidation process during sleep, resulting in stronger and more durable memories than marathon study sessions. Napping can also be a valuable tool. A 20 to 30-minute nap between 1 and 3 in the afternoon can restore alertness and improve cognitive performance for the remainder of the day. However, naps longer than 30 minutes can lead to sleep inertia, a period of grogginess upon waking. Real-life example, Priya, a second-year engineering student at the Indian Institute of Technology IIT Bombay, was a chronic all-nighter. She believed that sacrificing sleep to study more hours was the path to better grades. Despite consistently studying 12 to 14 hours a day in the weeks before examinations, her grades were declining. A cognitive psychology elective course introduced her to the research on sleep and memory consolidation. Skeptical but desperate, Priya committed to a radical change. She would stop studying by 11 p.m., sleep for at least 7 hours, and review her notes for 30 minutes each morning. She also began taking 20-minute naps after lunch. The results were dramatic. Her midterm grades improved by nearly 2-letter grades, and she reported feeling significantly less anxious and more confident during examinations. Science Insight. Research published in Nature Neuroscience demonstrated that slow-wave sleep SWS is critical for the consolidation of declarative memories. During SWS, hippocampal sharp-wave ripples synchronize with thalamocortical spindles and cortical slow oscillations to reactivate and stabilize newly formed memory traces, effectively saving them to long-term storage. Key takeaway: sleep is when memories are consolidated. Never sacrifice sleep to study more hours. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep and use the study sleep study method. Tip 4. Exercise regularly. Physical exercise is one of the most potent and underutilized tools for enhancing memory and concentration. The benefits of exercise on brain function are both immediate and long-lasting, operating through multiple biological mechanisms. Immediately after a bout of moderate aerobic exercise, such as brisk walking, cycling, or swimming for 30 to 45 minutes, levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor BDNF increase significantly. BDNF is often described as miracle grow for the brain because it stimulates the growth of new neurons, neurogenesis, strengthens existing synaptic connections, and enhances long-term potentiation, the cellular mechanism underlying learning and memory. Exercise also increases blood flow to the brain, delivering more oxygen and glucose to active neurons. A study from the University of British Columbia found that regular aerobic exercise actually increases the size of the hippocampus, the brain region most critical for memory formation. Participants who exercised for 150 minutes per week over a 1-year period showed measurable increases in hippocampal volume, while a control group that performed only stretching exercises showed a decline. For students, the timing of exercise matters. Research suggests that exercising in the morning before a study session can enhance focus and information absorption throughout the day. Moderate intensity exercise, where you can still carry on a conversation but feel slightly breathless, is optimal for cognitive benefits. Even short bouts of exercise can be beneficial. A 5-minute walk or a set of jumping jacks between study blocks can reset your attention and reduce mental fatigue. The key is consistency. Regular exercise produces compounding benefits over time. Real life example: Dr. John Rady, a clinical professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School and author of Spark, the revolutionary new science of exercise and the brain, documented the case of Naperville Central High School in Illinois. The school implemented an early morning exercise program called Zero Hour, where students participated in vigorous physical activity before their first academic class. The results were remarkable. Naperville students scored number 1 in the world in science and number 6 in math on the 10th International Standardized Test. Students who participated in the program showed significant improvements in attention, reading comprehension, and test scores. Science Insight, a 2019 meta-analysis in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, examined 39 studies involving 333,000 participants and concluded that regular physical exercise is associated with a 32% reduction in the risk of dementia and significant improvements in memory, attention, and processing speed across all age groups. Key takeaway: exercise is not separate from studying, it is a study strategy. Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise per week. Tip 5. Manage stress effectively. Stress is the silent killer of memory and concentration. When you experience stress, your body releases cortisol, a hormone that, in acute bursts, can enhance alertness. However, when cortisol levels remain chronically elevated, the effects on the brain are devastating. Chronic cortisol exposure damages the hippocampus, literally shrinking it over time. A shrunken hippocampus has reduced capacity for forming new memories. Cortisol also impairs the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for planning, decision making, and impulse control. Effective stress management includes deep breathing exercises. The 4-7-8 technique: inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and exhale for 8 seconds, activates the parasympathetic nervous system and can reduce cortisol levels within minutes. Time management is another critical strategy. Much of the stress students experience is self-generated, resulting from procrastination and poor planning. Breaking large assignments into smaller tasks and creating realistic study schedules can dramatically reduce the sense of being overwhelmed. Social connection is a powerful buffer against stress. Talking to friends, family, or counselors provides emotional release and often leads to practical solutions. Physical activities such as yoga and progressive muscle relaxation combine movement with mindfulness, addressing both the physical and psychological dimensions of stress. Real life example: during the 2023 academic year, researchers at Stanford University conducted a study with 240 undergraduate students experiencing high levels of academic stress. Half the students participated in an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction MBSR program that included daily 20-minute meditation sessions. At the end of the 8 weeks, the MBSR group showed a 23% reduction in cortisol levels, a 19% improvement in working memory capacity, and a 31% improvement in self-reported concentration during lectures. Science Insight: chronic stress has been shown to reduce hippocampal volume by up to 14% in individuals with prolonged PTSD, according to research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Key takeaway: chronic stress physically damages the brain regions responsible for memory. Implement daily stress management practices such as deep breathing, time management, and social connection. Tip 6. Limit sugar and processed foods. The modern student diet is often dominated by convenience foods, instant noodles, sugary snacks, and fast food meals that provide minimal nutritional value. While these foods may satisfy immediate cravings, they exact a heavy toll on brain function. Refined sugar is particularly damaging. When you consume sugar, blood glucose levels spike rapidly, triggering a large insulin response, followed by a sharp drop. the familiar sugar crash, which causes fatigue, irritability, and difficulty concentrating. Over time, repeated blood sugar spikes can lead to insulin resistance, which has been linked to reduced hippocampal function and impaired memory. Ultra-processed foods contain artificial additives that have been associated with attention deficits in children and adolescents. A 2022 study published in JAMA found that higher consumption of ultra-processed foods was associated with a 28% faster rate of cognitive decline. The practical solution is to make conscious choices to reduce intake. Replace sugary snacks with whole fruits, swap instant noodles for whole grain pasta with vegetables, and choose water over soda. These small substitutions compound over time to produce significant improvements in sustained attention and memory performance. Real-life example. A longitudinal study at the University of Sydney tracked 1,200 high school students over 3 years and found that those who consumed more than 3 servings of ultra-processed foods per day scored an average of 15% lower on standardized tests compared to students who consumed less than 1 serving per day. The school implemented a brain food initiative, replacing sugary snacks with nuts, yogurt, and fruit. Within 2 years, the school reported a measurable improvement in average test scores. Science Insight. A 2023 study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition demonstrated that reducing ultra-processed food intake by 50% for just 4 weeks led to significant improvements in working memory and attention. Key takeaway: sugar and ultra-processed foods impair memory and concentration. Make gradual substitutions toward whole, minimally processed foods. Tip 7. Take brain support supplements wisely. While a healthy diet should be the foundation of brain nutrition, certain supplements have demonstrated measurable cognitive benefits. Omega-3 fish oil supplements are among the most well-researched cognitive enhancers. If you do not eat fatty fish regularly, a high-quality fish oil supplement providing at least 1,000 milligrams of combined EPA and DHA can support neuronal membrane integrity. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, many of which are critical for brain function. Magnesium L-threonate has been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier effectively and enhance synaptic density in the hippocampus. Creatine, commonly associated with athletic performance, has also shown cognitive benefits. The brain uses a significant amount of ATP for energy, and creatine supplementation can increase brain phosphocreatine levels. B vitamins, especially B6, B9 folate, and B12, are essential for neurotransmitter synthesis. Deficiencies in these vitamins can cause fatigue, poor concentration, and memory lapses. However, caution is essential. Supplements are not magic pills. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any supplement regimen. Real-life example. David, a 22-year-old graduate student in computer science at the University of Toronto, was a vegan who had recently noticed increasing difficulty with concentration. Blood tests revealed that his B12 levels were significantly below normal. His physician recommended a B12 supplement and omega-3 algae supplements. Within 6 weeks, David reported a substantial improvement in his ability to sustain focus during long coding sessions. Science Insight. A 2022 randomized controlled trial found that magnesium L-threonate supplementation 2000 mg/day for 12 weeks significantly improved episodic memory, working memory, and executive function in healthy young adults. Key takeaway: supplements can fill nutritional gaps but are not a substitute for a healthy diet. Focus on omega-3s, magnesium, creatine, and B vitamins. Section 2. Study techniques. How to learn effectively. Tip 8. Use the Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro technique, developed by Francesco Cirillo, is one of the simplest and most effective time management methods for students. It works by breaking study sessions into focused, timed intervals separated by short breaks. The standard Pomodoro cycle: choose a single task, set a timer for 25 minutes, work with complete, undivided attention until the timer rings, take a 5-minute break. After 4 cycles, take a 15 to 30-minute break. The 25-minute interval is based on research showing that this duration is long enough to achieve deep focus but short enough to prevent mental fatigue. The regular breaks allow the brain's default mode network to activate, which is involved in memory consolidation and creative insight. During each interval, eliminate all distractions. Turn off phone notifications. close unnecessary browser tabs, and write any intrusive thoughts on a distraction list to address during the next break. The technique can be adapted. Some students prefer 30 or 40-minute Pomodoros for tasks requiring deeper concentration, while others prefer shorter intervals for lighter tasks. Real-life example. The Pomodoro technique was originally tested by Cirillo himself during his university years at the University of Rome. Struggling with procrastination, Cirillo used a tomato-shaped kitchen timer, hence the name Pomodoro, Italian for tomato, to commit to just 25 minutes of focused work. He found that the commitment to a short interval made it far easier to overcome initial resistance to starting. His grades improved dramatically, and he went on to formalize the technique, which has since been adopted by millions worldwide. Science Insight. Research in the journal Cognition found that brief diversions from a task can dramatically improve one's ability to maintain focus on that task for prolonged periods. Key takeaway. Break your study time into 25-minute focused intervals with short breaks. This method prevents burnout and maintains high-quality focus. Tip 9. Practice active recall. Active recall, also known as retrieval practice, is widely regarded by cognitive scientists as the single most effective study technique for long-term memory retention. Unlike passive review, rereading notes, or highlighting textbooks, active recall involves actively attempting to retrieve information from memory without looking at the source material. The mechanism is elegantly simple. Each time you successfully retrieve information from memory, the neural pathway is strengthened. This process, known as memory reconsolidation, makes the memory more durable and easier to access in the future. Information that is passively reviewed creates an illusion of fluency where the material feels familiar but cannot actually be recalled when needed. The most common form is self-testing. After studying a chapter, close your book and write down everything you can remember. Then check what you missed. Focus subsequent study on the gaps. Flashcards are another powerful tool. The key is to look at the question side, attempt to answer before flipping to the answer side, and honestly assess whether you knew the answer. A common objection is that active recall feels harder than rereading. This is actually a feature. The desirable difficulty signals that deeper learning is occurring. Real-life example. In a landmark study at Purdue University, students who studied a science article and then took a retrieval practice test recalled 50% more material after 1 week compared to students who studied the article 4 times without testing. This demonstrates that active recall produces more durable memories than passive review. Science Insight. A 2011 meta-analysis by Roediger and Butler in Psychological Science in the Public Interest concluded that retrieval practice produces superior long-term retention compared to all other common studied strategies. Key takeaway: stop rereading and start testing yourself. Active recall is the most effective way to strengthen memories and identify knowledge gaps. Tip 10. Use spaced repetition. Spaced repetition involves reviewing information at gradually increasing intervals over time. It is based on the spacing effect, first described by Hermann Ebbinghaus in 1885, which demonstrated that information is better retained when study sessions are spaced apart rather than concentrated in a single session. When you first learn something, the memory is fragile. Reviewing it before it fades strengthens the neural connection. Each subsequent review at an appropriate interval further strengthens the memory so that the gaps between reviews can be progressively widened. A common starting schedule: first, review 1 day after initial learning; second, review 3 days later; third, review 7 days later; fourth, review 14 days later; and fifth, review 30 days later. The most efficient approach is to use a spaced repetition system (SRS) that adapts to your individual performance. Digital tools like Anki, SuperMemo, and Quizlet have built-in spaced repetition algorithms that automate the scheduling process. The contrast with cramming is stark. When you cram, you store information in short-term memory. It is available for the test but forgotten within days. Spaced repetition builds long-term memories that persist for months or years. Real-life example: Dr. Peter Wozniak, the creator of SuperMemo, applied his own system to learn English as a foreign language. By reviewing vocabulary at algorithmically determined intervals, he acquired a vocabulary of over 70,000 words, a level of proficiency typically achieved only by native speakers after decades of immersion. Science Insight. A 2015 study in psychological science found that students who use spaced repetition remember 200% more material after 6 months compared to students who used mass practice cramming. Key takeaway: review material at increasing intervals: 1 day, 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, and 30 days after initial learning. Use an SRS app to automate the schedule. Tip 11. Implement the Feynman technique named after Nobel Prize winning physicist Richard Feynman. The Feynman technique is a method for achieving deep understanding by explaining concepts in simple terms. Feynman believed that if you cannot explain something to a child, you do not really understand it. The technique involves 4 steps. First, choose a concept and write its name at the top of a blank page. Second, explain it in your own words as if teaching a 12-year-old. Use simple language and draw diagrams. Third, identify areas where your explanation breaks down, where you resorted to jargon, or where your explanation felt vague. These gaps represent gaps in your understanding. Fourth, return to the source material to fill those gaps, then repeat the explanation process. The power lies in its ability to transform passive recognition into active understanding. When you reread, the material feels familiar. When you try to explain it, that illusion is shattered. This technique is particularly effective for subjects involving complex, hierarchical concepts: physics, chemistry, biology, economics, and philosophy. Real-life example: Scott Young, a Canadian blogger, completed the entire 4-year MIT computer science curriculum in just 12 months using the Feynman technique. For each concept, he would read the material, then explain it in simple terms on his blog. The process revealed numerous gaps in his understanding that he would not have discovered through rereading alone. He passed all 33 courses with a GPA equivalent to 3.9 on a 4.0 scale. Science Insight. Research on the protege effect has shown that teaching material to others enhances the teacher's own learning by promoting deeper processing and identification of gaps in understanding. Key takeaway: if you cannot explain it simply, you do not understand it well enough. Use the Feynman technique to expose and fill gaps in your understanding. Tip 12. Take effective notes. Note-taking is not merely record keeping. It is a powerful learning process that, when done correctly, can significantly enhance understanding and retention. The Cornell method is one of the most effective systems. Divide your page into 3 sections: a narrow left column, a wide right column, and a bottom section. During the lecture, take notes in the right column. After the lecture, write summary questions in the left column and a brief summary at the bottom. Research by Pam Mueller and Daniel Oppenheimer found that students who took notes by hand outperformed students who typed notes on a laptop. Handwriting is slower, forcing students to process and summarize information in real time rather than transcribing verbatim. Regardless of method, review your notes within 24 hours of taking them. The 24-hour period following initial learning is critical for determining what is retained. A brief 15-minute review session can increase retention by up to 60%. Real-life example: a study at Princeton University compared students using different note-taking methods. Students who used the Cornell method and reviewed notes within 24 hours scored an average of 87% on cumulative exams, compared to 73% for students who used standard linear notes without structured review. Science Insight. Neuroimaging studies have shown that handwriting activates brain regions associated with memory and spatial reasoning, while typing primarily activates language processing areas. Key takeaway: use the Cornell method, write notes by hand when possible, and review them within 24 hours. Tip 13. Use mind mapping. Mind mapping is a visual note-taking technique that mirrors how the brain naturally organizes information and interconnected networks rather than linear lists. Developed by Tony Buzan, mind mapping involves placing a central concept in the middle and branching outward with related subconcepts, keywords, and images. The visual nature provides several cognitive advantages. The use of colors, images, and spatial arrangement engages both hemispheres of the brain. The hierarchical structure mirrors how knowledge is organized in long-term memory. The act of creating a mind map requires identifying relationships between concepts, promoting deeper processing. To create an effective mind map, start with a central idea in the center. Draw branches for major themes and sub-branches for supporting details. Use single keywords rather than full sentences. Use colors to distinguish branches and add simple images where possible. Mind maps are particularly useful for brainstorming essay topics, reviewing for exams, and understanding complex systems. Real life example. Tony Buzan demonstrated the power of mind mapping when he used the technique to prepare for a university psychology exam. Rather than rereading a 400-page textbook, he created interconnected mind maps capturing essential concepts. He condensed the entire course into a single visual overview, reviewed it in 2 hours, and scored in the top 10% of his class. Science Insight. A 2017 study in educational psychology found that students who used mind mapping performed 32% better on immediate tests and 29% better on delayed tests compared to traditional note-taking methods. Key takeaway: use mind maps to visualize complex topics. The visual, nonlinear format engages more of the brain. Tip 14. Practice interleaving. Interleaving involves mixing different topics or types of problems within a single study session, rather than focusing on one topic at a time. Block practice. While block practice feels more comfortable, interleaving produces significantly better long-term retention and transfer. When you practice the same type of problem repeatedly, you can follow the same procedure without truly understanding why it works. When you alternate between different types, you must first identify which strategy is appropriate for each problem. This process of discrimination builds deep, flexible understanding. For example, a mathematics student would benefit from interleaving algebra, geometry, and calculus within a single session rather than studying each separately. When problems from different topics are mixed, the student must continuously evaluate which approach to apply. Interleaving is effective across mathematics, science, language learning, music practice, and even physical skills. Real life example. A study at the University of South Florida asked students to learn to identify paintings by different artists. One group studied each artist's paintings in separate blocks, while another studied them in a random, interleaved order. On a surprise test 1 week later, the interleaved group correctly identified 65% more paintings. They initially found the practice more difficult and rated their own learning as lower, but their actual performance was dramatically superior. Science Insight. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that interleaving improved math test scores by 43% compared to block practice. Key takeaway: mix different topics or problem types in each study session. Interleaving feels harder but produces stronger, more flexible learning. Tip 15. Teach what you learn. Teaching is one of the most powerful learning strategies available. When you teach, you must organize knowledge coherently, explain concepts clearly, answer questions, and handle unexpected challenges, all of which force deeper engagement with the material. The protege effect is a well-documented phenomenon in which people learn more effectively when they believe they will be teaching the material. A study at Washington University found that students who expected to teach organized their study time more efficiently, recalled more information, and performed better on tests. You do not need a classroom to benefit. Explaining a concept to a friend, recording yourself giving a lecture, or even explaining to an imaginary student the rubber duck method all provide cognitive benefits. Study groups provide natural opportunities for peer teaching. Rotate the role of teacher so each member teaches one topic per session. Real life example. In Finland, which consistently ranks among the top countries in global education assessments, peer teaching is a core component of classroom practice. Finnish students regularly take turns explaining concepts to classmates, and research has found that this practice benefits both the teacher and the students, who report that peer explanations are often more accessible than textbook explanations. Science Insight. A 2014 study in memory and cognition found that teaching material led to 75% better retention compared to simply studying for the same duration. Key takeaway: teaching is the ultimate form of learning. Form study groups where each member teaches a topic. Tip 16. Create mnemonics. Mnemonics are memory aids that help encode information in a more memorable format. They transform abstract information into vivid, structured associations that the brain can more easily store and retrieve. Acronym mnemonics create memorable words from first letters: Roy G, DIV for rainbow colors, YLRIG for oxidation and reduction, or some lovers try positions that they can't handle for the carpal bones. Acrostic mnemonics create sentences where first letters represent information. Every good boy does fine for treble clef notes, My very educated mother just served us nachos for the planets. The most powerful mnemonics are those you create yourself, because the creation process is itself a form of deep processing. Make your mnemonics vivid, humorous, bizarre, or emotionally engaging. Real life example. Champion memory athlete Nelson Delis uses mnemonic techniques to memorize multiple decks of shuffle playing cards in under an hour. For each card, he has a vivid mental image. The ace of spades might be a giant sword plunging into the ground. He places these images along a memorized journey through his house of memory palace. Delis has stated that anyone can learn these techniques with practice. Science Insight. A study in the journal Memory found that mnemonic strategies improve factual recall by an average of 40% across a range of subjects. Key takeaway: transform hard to remember information into vivid acronyms, acrostics, or images. Create your own mnemonics for maximum benefit. Tip 17. Use visualization. Visualization, creating vivid mental images of concepts you are studying, is one of the most ancient and powerful memory techniques. The human brain is fundamentally a visual processing system. The visual cortex occupies approximately 30% of the cortex, far more than any other sensory modality. To use visualization for memory, transform abstract concepts into concrete, vivid images. If studying the structure of a cell, visualize the nucleus as a glowing orb, the endoplasmic reticulum as winding corridors, and mitochondria as power plants with spinning turbines. The more bizarre, humorous, or emotionally engaging the image, the more memorable it will be. The brain is wired to remember things that are unusual or emotionally significant. Visualization is particularly effective when combined with the memory palace technique and narrative. Real-life example. A study at the University of Waterloo tested students learning 80 Swahili vocabulary words. The visualization group remembered 72% more words on a test 1 week later. Students who combined visualization with the memory palace technique recalled over 90% of the words. Science Insight. Dual coding theory suggests that information encoded in both verbal and visual formats creates two independent memory traces, roughly doubling the probability of successful recall. Key takeaway: transform abstract information into vivid, bizarre mental images. The more memorable the image, the more durable the memory. Section 3. Memory Systems, Ancient and Modern Techniques. TIP-18. Build a memory palace. The memory palace, also known as the method of loci, is arguably the most powerful memorization technique ever developed. Invented by the ancient Greek poet Simonides of Ceos around 500 BC, it has been used by memory champions for over 2,500 years. The technique exploits the brain's extraordinary ability to remember spatial locations. Choose a route through a location you know well, your home or school. Identify specific stopping points, loci along this route, the front door, hallway, kitchen counter, and so on. To memorize information, create vivid, bizarre images for each item and place them at the successive loci. To recall, simply take a mental walk along your route and see the images you placed at each location. The spatial and visual nature of the technique makes recall almost effortless compared to rote memorization. Most people can comfortably use 10 to 20 loci in a single palace. Real-life example. In a landmark experiment at the University of California, Santa Barbara, students who learned the memory palace technique for just 6 weeks were able to memorize sequences of 60 to 70 random words in a single session. Brain imaging showed that they had developed stronger connections between the hippocampus and the cortex, demonstrating that the technique literally rewires the brain. Science Insight. fMRI studies have shown that experienced users of the method of loci activate the hippocampus and parahippocampal gyres, brain regions critical for spatial navigation, when encoding non-spatial information. Key takeaway: use familiar locations as storage for information by placing vivid images at specific points along a mental route. The memory palace is the most powerful memorization technique known. Tip 19. Use emotional anchors in memory. An advanced variation of the memory palace involves using emotionally charged images as anchors. The amygdala modulates memory consolidation in the hippocampus. Information associated with strong emotions is encoded more deeply and recalled more reliably. When creating images for your memory palace, deliberately choose images that evoke strong emotions: fear, humor, surprise, disgust, or joy. If memorizing the stages of mitosis, imagine a cell screaming in terror as it splits apart. Another technique is to use personally meaningful images that connect to your own experiences. These personal connections add an additional layer of meaning that strengthens the memory. The key is balance. Images should be emotionally engaging but not so disturbing that they cause anxiety. Humor is often the most effective emotional anchor. Real life example. The Roman orator Cicero described how ancient Greek and Roman speakers used the method of loci with emotional imagery to memorize speeches lasting several hours. Modern memory champion Chris Lyons uses emotionally charged images to memorize thousands of digits and hundreds of words, consistently achieving recall accuracies above 95%. Science Insight. Research by James McGaw has demonstrated that emotional arousal enhances memory consolidation through the release of stress hormones that act on the amygdala and hippocampus. Key takeaway: add emotional intensity to your memory palace images. The brain remembers emotional information far better than neutral information. Tip 20. Practice chunking. Chunking is the process of breaking large amounts of information into smaller, meaningful units. This technique exploits the fundamental limitation of short-term memory, which can typically hold only 7 plus or minus 2 items at a time. A phone number, 5,551,234,567, becomes 555-123-4567. Each chunk contains multiple pieces of information but occupies only one slot in working memory. In academic contexts, chunking manages complex information. A history student might chunk the causes of World War I into 4 categories: political, economic, nationalistic, and military. Each category contains multiple specific causes, but the student only needs to remember 4 chunks. In programming, experienced developers chunk code into familiar patterns, loops, conditionals, design patterns, rather than reading each line individually. To apply chunking, look for natural groupings, organize items into categories, and practice identifying the big picture before filling in details. Real-life example. George Miller's classic 1956 paper The Magical Number 7, plus or minus 2, demonstrated that short-term memory capacity could be dramatically increased through chunking. Participants could remember only about 7 random digits but could remember significantly more when they were arranged in meaningful chunks. Chess grandmasters can typically remember 25 to 30 pieces after a brief glance, not because they have superior memory, but because they chunk positions into familiar patterns. Science Insight. Cognitive load theory explains that chunking reduces intrinsic cognitive load, freeing working memory resources for deeper processing. Key takeaway: break large amounts of information into small, meaningful chunks. Group related items into categories to dramatically increase your working memory capacity. Tip 21. Use association chains. Association chains link each item in a sequence to the next through vivid mental images. The technique exploits the brain's natural tendency to think in associations and narratives. Create a vivid image for the first item, then create an image connecting the first to the second in a dynamic, action-oriented way. Continue linking each item until the chain is complete. For example, to memorize historical events in chronological order: French Revolution, American Civil War, World War I, Moon Landing. Imagine a French aristocrat throwing a baguette at Abraham Lincoln, who uses it to knock over a WWI soldier who stumbles backward into a rocket launching toward the moon. The key principle is that each image must be vivid, action-oriented, and absurd. The brain is far better at remembering dynamic scenes than static ones. Real-life example. Association chains were used by ancient Greek and Roman rhetoricians to memorize long speeches. A study at the University of Cambridge found that participants who used association chains to memorize lists of 20 words remembered 85% of the items after 1 week, compared to only 35% for participants who used rote repetition. Science Insight. The generation effect in cognitive psychology shows that information actively created or linked by the learner is remembered better than information passively received. Key takeaway: link items in a sequence through vivid, absurd mental images. The more dynamic and bizarre the connections, the stronger the memory. Tip 22. Create story associations. Story associations weave information into a coherent narrative. Humans are inherently storytelling creatures, Our brains are wired to remember narratives far more effectively than isolated facts. Take the information you need to remember and create a story. This story does not need to make logical sense. It simply needs to create a sequence of connected events. For example, to memorize the Krebs cycle, create a story about a character named Citrate who goes on an adventure, meeting enzymes that transform him through each step of the cycle. Stories provide natural organizational frameworks. Characters provide anchors. Plot events create temporal sequences. Emotional engagement enhances encoding and retention. Real-life example. The oral traditions of indigenous cultures demonstrate the power of story-based memorization. Australian Aboriginal songlines encode thousands of years of geographical and cultural knowledge in narrative songs passed down through generations. These songlines serve as mnemonic devices and navigational guides, preserving knowledge for tens of thousands of years. Science Insight. Research in the journal Science of Learning found that information presented in narrative format was remembered 6 to 7 times more effectively than isolated facts. Key takeaway: turn your study material into a story. The narrative structure creates natural hooks that make information easier to encode, store, and retrieve. Tip 23. Use the PEG system. The PEG system uses pre-memorized PEG images as mental hooks for new information. Unlike the memory palace, which requires a new route for each set of information, the PEG system uses fixed associations that can be reused indefinitely. First, memorize PEG words, words that rhyme with numbers: 1 bun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 hive, 6 sticks, 7 heaven, 8 gate, 9 vine, 10 hen. Create vivid images for each. To memorize a new list, associate each item with the corresponding PEG. For the first 10 elements of the periodic table, imagine hydrogen atoms floating inside a giant bun, helium balloons pouring out of a shoe, a tree covered in lithium batteries, and so on. The PEG system is particularly useful for lists with a fixed order. Once the PEGs are memorized, they can be used for any new list. Real-life example: Harry Lorraine, one of the most famous memory trainers, demonstrated the PEG system on television by memorizing the order of an entire shuffled deck of cards in less than 2 minutes. He taught the technique to thousands of students and executives, consistently demonstrating that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary memory feats. Science Insight. A study at the University of Sussex found that participants using the PEG system recalled 90% of a 20-item list after 1 week, compared to 30% for rote memorization. Key takeaway: pre-memorize a set of PEG images: 1 bun, 2 shoe, etc., and use them as hooks for any new list you need to remember. Tip 24. Use the number shape system. The number shape system assigns visual images to numbers based on their physical appearance. 0 equals ball, 1 equals candle, 2 equals swan, 3 equals heart, 4 equals sailboat, 5 equals hook, 6 equals cherry, 7 equals cliff, 8 equals snowman, 9 equals balloon on a string. To memorize a numbered list, associate each item with a corresponding number shape image using a vivid, action-oriented mental image. The number shape system is particularly useful for visually oriented students. It can be combined with the PEG system or used independently. Real-life example: Dominic O'Brien, 8-time world memory champion, developed a sophisticated version of the number shape system that he used to memorize multiple decks of shuffled playing cards and thousands of random digits. His books have helped millions of people improve their memory using visual numeric associations. Science Insight. Research on visual encoding has shown that images combining visual and semantic information are encoded in multiple brain regions simultaneously, creating richer, more retrievable memory traces. Key takeaway: assign visual images to numbers based on their shape and use them as hooks for memorizing numbered lists. Section 4. Focus and concentration. Mastering attention. TIP 25. Eliminate distractions. In the modern world, distraction is the default state of the student's attention. Smartphones, social media, and the internet create an environment fundamentally hostile to deep study. Research shows it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully regain focus after an interruption. The solution is environmental design. Put your phone in another room during study sessions. A study at the University of Texas found that the mere presence of the smartphone on a desk, even turned off, reduced cognitive capacity. The brain must actively resist the temptation. consuming mental resources even when the phone is not in use. Use website blockers such as Cold Turkey, Freedom, or Force to block distracting websites during study periods. Close all browser tabs unrelated to the current task. Communicate your study schedule to others. Tell roommates and friends that you will be unavailable during specific time blocks. Real life example: Larry Rosen, a psychology professor, observed that university students could focus for only 6 minutes before switching to non academic activities, most commonly checking social media. When students put phones in another room and disabled notifications, average focus time increased to 35 minutes, nearly 6 times longer. Science Insight: a 2017 study in the Journal of the Association for Consumer Research found that reducing smartphone availability significantly improved performance on tests of working memory capacity and fluid intelligence. Key takeaway: remove your phone from the room during study sessions. Even a turned off phone reduces cognitive capacity. Tip 26: practice meditation. Meditation is one of the most powerful and well researched tools for enhancing concentration. Regular meditation physically changes the brain, increasing prefrontal cortex thickness, reducing amygdala volume, and strengthening attention-related connections. Mindfulness meditation, focusing on the present moment without judgment, is the most studied form. Sit comfortably, focus on your breathing, and when your mind wanders, gently notice and return to your breath. Each redirection strengthens attentional control. Research by Amishi J.H.A. at the University of Miami has shown that 12 minutes of daily meditation produces measurable improvements in attention and working memory within 8 weeks. Meditation also reduces the mind-wandering tendency. The default mode network is less active in experienced meditators, meaning they spend less time daydreaming. For students who find sitting meditation difficult, walking meditation or yoga offer similar benefits. Real-life example: the Mindful Schools program, implemented in over 50 U.S. schools, teaches students a simple 5-minute mindfulness meditation daily. Schools reported significant improvements in student attention, behavior, and academic performance. One school in Oakland reported a 74% reduction in suspensions and a 20% improvement in test scores. Science Insight: a 2014 meta-analysis in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews reviewed 24 studies and found that meditation training improved attention, executive function, and memory, with effect sizes comparable to physical exercise. Key takeaway: start with just 12 minutes of daily mindfulness meditation. Each session strengthens your attentional control over time. Tip 27: use background music strategically. The relationship between music and cognitive performance is nuanced. For some students, music enhances focus. For others, it fragments attention. Music without lyrics is generally less distracting because lyrics activate language processing areas competing with academic tasks. Instrumental music, classical, ambient, lo-fi hip-hop, or nature sounds, provides consistent auditory backdrop without interfering with cognitive processing. The Mozart effect has been largely debunked, but research supports a more modest claim. Pleasant, emotionally engaging music can temporarily improve spatial temporal reasoning and mood. The optimal use depends on the task. For deep reading, silence is best. For repetitive tasks, background music can be beneficial. Apps like Brain.fm, L, and Noisely create music specifically designed to enhance focus. Real-life example: a study at the University of Wales compared students studying in silence with classical music, pop music, and ambient noise. The ambient noise group performed best on creative tasks, while the classical music group performed best on rote memorization. The pop music group performed worst, likely due to distracting lyrics. Science Insight: research and perception found that ambient noise approximately 70 dB enhances performance on creative tasks by promoting abstract processing. Key takeaway: use instrumental, lyric-free music or ambient noise for background study sound. Match the music type to your task. Tip 28: take strategic breaks. Taking breaks is not laziness. It is a scientifically validated strategy for maintaining high-quality focus. The brain's capacity for sustained attention is limited, and pushing past that limit leads to declining performance. Effective breaks involve activities that engage different brain networks than those used during studying. The best restorative activities include walking outdoors, light stretching, brief meditation, looking at distant objects, or simply sitting quietly. The ultradian rhythm concept suggests the brain operates in roughly 90-minute cycles. Studying for 90 minutes followed by a 15 to 20-minute break aligns with this natural rhythm. Strategic breaks also provide an opportunity for diffuse mode thinking, unconscious processing that occurs when you step away from a problem. Many students have experienced a solution suddenly appearing after they stopped actively working. Real life example: Albert Einstein was known for taking long walks while contemplating physics problems. He credited many breakthrough insights to these walks. Similarly, Henry Poincaré described how a solution came to him while boarding a bus after he had stopped working on the problem. Modern research confirms that the brain's diffuse mode network makes connections between distant ideas that the focus mode misses. Science Insight. Research published in Psychological Science found that brief diversions can dramatically improve sustained attention, with optimal break duration depending on task complexity. Key takeaway: take genuine restorative breaks, walks, meditation, or simply resting your eyes. The brain consolidates learning during rest. Tip 29. Set clear goals. Vague study intentions. How study biology today are far less effective than specific, measurable goals. I will complete Chapter 7 review questions and memorize 30 flashcards by 4 p.m. Specificity transforms an amorphous task into a concrete, actionable plan. Edwin Locke and Gary Latham's goal-setting theory has consistently shown that specific, challenging goals lead to higher performance. Specific goals direct attention, mobilize effort, increase persistence, and promote development of task-relevant strategies. Set goals at 3 levels: long-term RNA and organic chemistry, weekly complete practice problems for chapters 5-7 by Friday, and daily solve 20 problems between 2 and 4 p.m. Writing down goals significantly increases the probability of achieving them. A study at Dominican University found that people who wrote down goals were 42% more likely to achieve them. Real-life example: Dr. Gail Matthews at Dominican University studied 267 participants. Those who wrote down goals and shared weekly progress reports achieved a significantly higher percentage of their goals. The goal writing group reported a 33% higher success rate. Science Insight. Goal setting theory, supported by over 1,000 studies, shows that specific, challenging goals lead to performance levels 10-25% higher than easy or vague goals. Key takeaway: write down specific, measurable study goals for each session. Specificity transforms vague intentions into actionable plans. Tip 30. Use the 2-minute rule. The 2-minute rule, popularized by David Allen, states, if a task takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. For studying, this applies in 2 ways. First, when you sit down to study, commit to studying for just 2 minutes. This overcomes the hardest part of studying: starting. Research on procrastination shows the emotional resistance to beginning is often greater than the actual difficulty. Once you start, you will almost always continue for much longer. Second, use the rule for small study tasks, reviewing flashcards, organizing notes, or writing a brief summary. Each contributes to cumulative learning. The rule works because it reduces the cognitive and emotional barrier to starting. The brain's default response to large, ambiguous tasks is avoidance. By breaking tasks into 2-minute chunks, you make them feel small and immediately completable. Real-life example: James Clear describes using the 2-minute rule to establish a reading habit. Instead of committing to an hour of daily reading, he committed to reading 1 page. This 2-minute commitment was so small it felt trivial to begin. Once he started, he almost always continued. Within a year, he had read over 50 books. Science Insight. Research on the attention-behavior gap shows the biggest obstacle to studying is not lack of knowledge, but difficulty initiating behavior. The 2-minute rule reduces this barrier. Key takeaway: commit to just 2 minutes of studying to overcome resistance to starting. Momentum will carry you forward. Tip 31. Practice single tasking. Multitasking is a myth. The brain cannot perform 2 cognitively demanding tasks simultaneously. It can only switch rapidly between them, incurring a cognitive cost with each switch. This task switching cost manifests as increased errors, reduced quality, greater mental fatigue, and longer total time. Research by David Mayer found that task switching can reduce productivity by up to 40%. Studying while checking social media is not slightly less efficient, it is dramatically less effective than focused, single task study. Single tasking means committing fully to one study task at a time. If reading, read. If writing, write. If you need to respond to a message, finish your current study block first. A practical tool, the one tab rule, keep only tabs related to your current study task open. Real life example. A study at Stanford found that heavy media multitaskers performed worse on tests of working memory, attention, and task switching ability than students who rarely multitasked. Paradoxically, the heavy multitaskers were worse at filtering irrelevant information, the skill they practice most. Chronic multitasking may actually rewire the brain in ways that impair sustained focus. Science Insight. A 2018 study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that even brief interruptions can double the number of errors on subsequent tasks. Key takeaway: do one thing at a time. Multitasking reduces productivity by up to 40%. Close all unrelated tabs and apps. Tip 32. Create a study ritual. A study ritual is a consistent set of actions performed before each study session that signals to your brain it is time to shift into focus mode. Rituals leverage the brain's associative learning systems. A study ritual might include preparing a specific beverage, sitting at a designated study spot, reviewing goals, clearing your desk, putting on a specific playlist, and taking 3 deep breaths before beginning. The specific actions matter less than the consistency. The ritual works by creating a psychological entry point into a focused state. Over weeks and months, the ritual becomes increasingly effective as the association strengthens. Eventually, simply performing the first step triggers a shift into focused attention. Real life example: Stephen King has a famously consistent writing ritual. He writes in the same room, at the same desk, at the same time each day, with the same arrangement of materials. He begins by reviewing what he wrote the previous day. This ritual creates a predictable context that signals to his brain it is time to write. The same principle applies to studying. Science Insight. Research on implementation intentions by Peter Gallwitzer has shown that linking a desired behavior to a specific situational cue significantly increases the likelihood and quality of performance. Key takeaway: develop a consistent set of pre-study actions and perform them before every session. The ritual becomes a conditioned trigger for focused attention. Tip 33. Use time blocking. Time blocking assigns specific blocks of time to specific tasks rather than working from a vague to-do list. Instead of study biology sometime today, you schedule 900-1100 a.m. Biology Chapter 7. Time blocking works because it eliminates decision fatigue, the mental exhaustion from having to make choices throughout the day. With a time block schedule, you simply look at the current time and do whatever is scheduled. Effective time blocking requires being realistic about how long tasks take, scheduling cognitively demanding tasks during peak alertness hours, and scheduling breaks explicitly within blocks. Digital tools like Google Calendar, Notion, and Todoist make time blocking easy to implement and adjust. The visual nature of a time block calendar provides a clear overview of how time is allocated. Real-life example: Cal Newport, author of Deep Work, attributes his productivity to rigorous time blocking. He schedules every minute of his workday in advance. He has used the system to write multiple books, publish dozens of papers, and maintain a popular blog, all while working no more than 8 hours per day. Science Insight. Research on pre-commitment strategies shows that scheduling specific times for specific tasks increases follow-through by 50-80% compared to relying on daily decision-making. Key takeaway: schedule specific tasks in specific time blocks. This eliminates decision fatigue and ensures every study session has a clear purpose. Section 5. Environment. Optimizing your physical space. TIP 34. Optimize your study space. Your physical study environment profoundly impacts concentration and learning. Environmental factors such as noise, lighting, temperature, clutter, and ergonomics all influence cognitive performance. A dedicated study space, used exclusively for studying, trains the brain to associate that location with focused work. When you study in bed, the brain receives conflicting signals because the bed is associated with sleep. Desk organization matters. A cluttered desk creates visual distractions and increases cognitive load. Keep only materials needed for the current session on your desk. Air quality is often overlooked. Carbon dioxide levels rise in poorly ventilated rooms, and elevated CO2 impairs cognitive performance. Open a window periodically. A study by Harvard found that improved ventilation increased cognitive scores by up to 101%. Personalize your study space with items that promote positive emotions, a plant, a motivational quote, or a small piece of artwork. Real life example. A study at the University of Exeter examined workplace design effects on cognitive performance. Workers in lean offices with minimal personal items performed 15% lower on cognitive tests than workers in enriched environments with plants, photos, and decorations. Science insight. Environmental psychology research has consistently shown that moderate environmental complexity optimizes cognitive performance, while both overly sparse and overly cluttered environments are suboptimal. Key takeaway: create a dedicated, organized, well ventilated study space. Remove clutter and add items that promote positive emotions. Tip 35. Use proper lighting. Lighting affects not just your ability to see study materials, but also alertness, mood, and circadian rhythm. Poor lighting causes eye strain, headaches, and drowsiness. Natural daylight is the best lighting for studying. Studies show students who study near windows perform better academically and report higher alertness. When natural light is insufficient, use full spectrum LED bulbs 5000 6500 Kelvin. Avoid warm, yellowish lighting that promotes sleepiness. Desk lamps should be positioned to minimize glare. Place the lamp on the opposite side of your writing hand to prevent shadows. The 20-20-20 rule is essential. Every 20 minutes, look at an object at least 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds. Real life example. The Hascon Mahon Group studied over 21,000 students in 3 school districts. Students in classrooms with the most natural daylight progressed 20% faster in math and 26% faster in reading compared to students in the least naturally lit classrooms. Several school districts subsequently modified building designs to maximize natural light. Science insight. Research in sleep found that exposure to bright light greater 1000 lux during daytime study hours increases alertness and enhances cognitive performance. Key takeaway: study near windows when possible. Use full spectrum lighting and follow the 20-20-20 rule to prevent eye strain. Tip 36. Control temperature. Room temperature significantly affects cognitive performance. The brain functions optimally within a narrow temperature range. Too hot and you feel drowsy. Too cold and you become distracted by discomfort. The optimal temperature for cognitive work is between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 to 22 degrees Celsius. A study by the Helsinki University of Technology found that performance on cognitive tests peaked at 71.6 degrees Fahrenheit and declined measurably at temperatures above 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Air conditioning systems that maintain consistent temperature and humidity create the most stable environment for studying. If you don't have air conditioning, fans, appropriate clothing, and taking breaks in cooler environments can help. Humidity matters too. Very dry air below 20% relative humidity can cause dry eyes and headaches, while very humid air above 60% promotes lethargy. The ideal range is 40-60% relative humidity. Real life example. A study at Cornell University found that workers in offices without air conditioning were 44% more likely to make errors and had a 65% lower rate of completing tasks correctly compared to workers in temperature-controlled environments. Science insight. Research published in the journal Indoor Air found that increasing room temperature from 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit reduced typing speed by 7% and increased typing errors by 50%. Key takeaway: maintain room temperature between 68-72 degrees Fahrenheit for optimal cognitive performance. Tip 37. Keep your desk organized. A cluttered desk is a cluttered mind. Visual clutter competes for your attention and increases cognitive load, even when you are not consciously aware of it. Your brain processes everything in your visual field, and a disorganized workspace forces it to expend energy filtering out irrelevant stimuli. The clean desk principle suggests keeping only the materials needed for your current study task on your desk. Everything else should be stored in drawers, shelves, or file organizers. This includes old notes, unrelated textbooks, gadgets, and personal items. Implement an end of session routine. After each study session, spend 2 to 3 minutes organizing your desk for the next session. File away completed assignments, close and stack books, and prepare the materials you'll need next time. Digital clutter matters too. Organize your computer desktop with clear folder structures, close unused applications, and keep only relevant browser tabs open. Real life example. A study at the Princeton Neuroscience Institute found that physical clutter in your surroundings competes for your attention, resulting in decreased performance and increased stress. Participants in organized environments made fewer errors and were more efficient than those in cluttered environments. Science Insight. Research from UCLA Center on Everyday Lives of Families found that mothers who described their homes as cluttered or full of unfinished projects had flatter cortisol slopes throughout the day, indicating chronic stress that impaired cognitive function. Key takeaway: keep only current study materials on your desk. Spend 2 minutes organizing after each session. Reduce both physical and digital clutter. Tip 38. Use ergonomic furniture. Physical discomfort is one of the most common but least recognized causes of poor concentration during study sessions. Back pain, neck strain, wrist discomfort, and eye fatigue all divert attentional resources away from learning. An ergonomic study setup includes a chair that supports the natural curve of your spine, feet flat on the floor or on a footrest, a desk at a height that allows your forearms to be parallel to the floor, and a computer monitor positioned at arm's length with the top of the screen at or slightly below eye level. The standing desk option has gained popularity for good reason. Alternating between sitting and standing throughout the day can reduce fatigue, improve alertness, and prevent the physical discomfort associated with prolonged sitting. Research suggests alternating every 30-45 minutes. Monitor positioning is critical for preventing eye strain. Position your screen 20-26 inches from your eyes, slightly below eye level, with the screen tilted back 10-20 degrees. Enable night mode or blue light filters on devices used during evening study sessions. Real-life example. A study at Texas A&M University found that employees who used sit-stand desks reported 87% less stress and fatigue compared to those who sat all day. When applied to study contexts, ergonomic improvements can extend productive study time by 30-45 minutes per session by reducing physical discomfort. Science Insight. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration (OSHA) estimates that ergonomic improvements can reduce musculoskeletal disorders by 60% and increase productivity by 50-25%. Key takeaway: invest in an ergonomic chair and proper desk setup. Physical comfort supports sustained concentration. Tip 39. Minimize digital distractions in the digital age. Your computer and phone are simultaneously your most powerful study tools and your greatest sources of distraction. Learning to manage the digital environment is as important as managing the physical one. Start with your phone. Enable Do Not Disturb mode during study sessions. Better yet, place the phone in another room. If you need your phone for emergencies, use focus mode to allow calls from specific contacts while blocking all notifications. On your computer, use separate user profiles for studying and personal use. The study profile should have no social media bookmarks, no personal email, and limited distractions. Applications like Cold Turkey can block distracting websites for specified time periods. Email is a major source of distraction. Schedule specific times to check email, for example, before lunch and at the end of the day rather than checking continuously. Each email check triggers a context switch that costs focus time. Browser tab management is critical. Each open tab represents a potential distraction and a cognitive load. Close everything not directly related to your current study task. Real-life example. A study at the University of California, Irvine found that the average worker checks email 77 times per day, and each check triggers an average of 25 minutes and 26 seconds of refocusing time. For students who check email and social media while studying, the cumulative focus loss is enormous. Science Insight. Research by Gloria Mark at UC Irvine found that people who were frequently interrupted showed 20% higher levels of frustration, 20% higher stress, and significantly more errors compared to those who could focus without interruption. Key takeaway: enable Do Not Disturb. Use separate computer profiles and batch process email at scheduled times to protect your focus. Section 6, Advanced Techniques, Pushing Mental Boundaries, TIP 40, Practice Brain Training Games, digital exercises designed to challenge cognitive functions like working memory, attention, and processing speed have become a popular tool for students seeking to enhance their mental abilities. The evidence for brain training is mixed but promising. Some studies show that specific brain training programs can produce measurable improvements in the targeted cognitive functions, while other studies show limited transfer to real-world academic performance. The most well-researched programs include Lumosity, Brain HQ, which grew out of the ACTIVE study, one of the largest cognitive training trials, and Dual NBAC training. Dual NBAC is particularly interesting because research has shown it can improve working memory capacity, which is closely linked to fluid intelligence. The key is to use brain training as a supplement to, not a replacement for, traditional study techniques. Brain training improves the cognitive hardware, working memory, attention, processing speed, while traditional study techniques improve the software knowledge, understanding, skills. For optimal benefit, practice brain training for 15-20 minutes per day, at least 5 days per week, for a minimum of 4 weeks. Consistency matters more than session length. Real-life example, the Active Advanced Cognitive Training for Independent and Vital Elderly study, funded by the National Institute on Aging, is the largest randomized controlled trial of cognitive training ever conducted. It followed 2,832 participants over 10 years and found that the group that received memory training showed significant improvements in memory function that persisted for 5 years after the training ended. The processing speed training group showed improvements in speed and writing ability that persisted for 3 years. Science Insight. The 2017 meta-analysis in intelligence found that dual NBAC training produced a small but statistically significant improvement in fluid intelligence GF, with an effect size of approximately 0.24 standard deviations after 4 weeks of training. Key takeaway: use brain training games like Dual NBAC for 15-20 minutes daily to improve working memory and processing speed, but combine with traditional study techniques for best results. Tip 41. Learn a new language. Learning a new language is one of the most comprehensive brain workouts available. It engages virtually every cognitive system: memory, vocabulary, attention, grammar rules, executive function, switching between languages, and auditory processing, listening comprehension. Bilingual individuals consistently outperform monolinguals on tests of executive function, attentional control, and cognitive flexibility. This bilingual advantage is thought to result from the constant practice of inhibiting one language while using the other, a form of cognitive training that enhances attentional control. Research at the University of Edinburgh found that individuals who learned a second language, even in adulthood, showed improvements in attention, concentration, and the early signs of dementia were delayed by an average of 4 to 5 years compared to monolinguals. For students, learning vocabulary in a new language is an excellent opportunity to practice spaced repetition and active recall. The combination of language learning and these evidence-based techniques creates a powerful synergy for cognitive enhancement. Even basic proficiency in a second language provides cognitive benefits. You don't need to become fluent. The process of learning itself provides the brain benefits. Real-life example. Ellen Bialystok at York University has conducted decades of research showing that bilingual individuals show symptoms of Alzheimer's disease an average of 4 to 5 years later than monolinguals, despite having equivalent levels of brain pathology. This suggests that bilingualism enhances cognitive reserve, the brain's ability to compensate for damage. Science Insight. A 2014 study in Annals of Neurology found that bilingualism was associated with a 4.5-year delay in dementia onset, regardless of education level, sex, or occupation. Key takeaway: learning a new language provides a comprehensive brain workout. Start with basic vocabulary using spaced repetition for maximum cognitive benefit. Tip 42. Play musical instruments. Playing a musical instrument is perhaps the most brain-demanding activity a student can undertake. It simultaneously engages the visual, auditory, and motor cortices, requiring real-time coordination of multiple brain regions. Research at the Harvard Medical School found that musicians have significantly larger and more connected brain networks compared to non-musicians. The corpus callosum, the bridge connecting the left and right brain hemispheres, is measurably larger in musicians, indicating enhanced interhemispheric communication. Learning to read music engages symbolic processing similar to learning a new language. Practicing an instrument develops fine motor coordination, working memory reading ahead while playing current notes, and executive function maintaining rhythm, dynamics, and expression simultaneously. For students, even 30 minutes of daily instrument practice has been shown to improve academic performance, particularly in mathematics and spatial reasoning. A study at the University of British Columbia found that students who participated in music programs scored higher on standardized tests and had better attendance records than students who did not. You don't need to become a virtuoso. The cognitive benefits emerge from the practice of learning and playing, not from performance level. Guitar, piano, ukulele, or even a simple percussion instrument can provide significant cognitive stimulation. Real life example. A study at the University of Vermont College of Medicine found that children who received musical training showed more developed brains in areas responsible for language, reading, and sound discrimination. Brain scans revealed that musical training was associated with cortical thickness changes in auditory and motor areas, and that these changes predicted improvements in non-musical cognitive abilities. Science Insight research published in the Journal of Neuroscience found that musicians had enhanced working memory, attention, and processing speed compared to non-musicians, with a degree of enhancement correlating with the number of years of musical training. Key takeaway: playing an instrument provides comprehensive brain stimulation. Even 30 minutes daily improves attention, working memory, and academic performance. Tip 43. Practice speed reading. Speed reading is the practice of reading text faster than normal while maintaining comprehension. While the extreme claims of some speed reading courses reading 1,000 plus words per minute with full comprehension have been debunked, legitimate speed reading techniques can meaningfully improve reading efficiency. Most people read at approximately 200-250 words per minute. With training, this can be increased to 400-500 words per minute with maintained comprehension, effectively doubling the amount of material covered in the same time. The foundation of speed reading is reducing subvocalization, the habit of saying each word in your head as you read. Subvocalization limits reading speed to approximately speaking speed 200-300 words per minute. Techniques for reducing subvocalization include listening to music while reading, using a pointer, pen, or finger to guide your eyes, and practicing with material that is well below your current reading level. Another key technique is expanding peripheral vision. Instead of focusing on one word at a time, practice taking in groups of words with each eye fixation. This chunking of text allows you to process more words per fixation. For studying, speed reading is most useful for skimming and surveying material to get an overview, scanning for specific information, and reading material that is below your comprehension threshold. For complex, challenging material, slower reading with active engagement is more appropriate. Real life example: Anne Jones, a British speed reading champion, can read approximately 4,700 words per minute while maintaining comprehension. While this represents the extreme end of human capability, Jones has trained ordinary people to achieve reading speeds of 600-800 words per minute through systematic practice. Her methods focus on reducing subvocalization, expanding peripheral vision, and using structured previewing of material before detailed reading. Science Insight. A meta-analysis in the Journal of Reading found that systematic speed reading training improves reading speed by an average of 55% from 247 to 383 WPM while maintaining comprehension levels above 70% of normal speed reading comprehension. Key takeaway: train to reduce subvocalization and expand peripheral vision. Speed reading doubles the amount of material you can process in the same time. Tip 44. Use the Memory Journal. A memory journal is a dedicated notebook where you record key learnings, insights, and reflections from each study session. It serves as both a learning tool and a metacognitive instrument that helps you understand how you learn best. At the end of each study session, spend 5 minutes writing what you studied, what you learned, what was difficult, what strategies you used, and what you need to review next. This brief reflection consolidates learning by forcing you to articulate what you've absorbed. A memory journal also serves as a brain dump, a place to externalize thoughts, worries, and ideas that might otherwise distract you during study. When an intrusive thought occurs during studying, write it in the journal and return to it later. Over time, a memory journal becomes an invaluable resource for identifying patterns in your learning. You may discover that you learn best in the morning, that certain study strategies work better for specific subjects, or that particular types of material are consistently challenging. This self knowledge allows you to optimize your study approach. The journal also serves as a record of your academic journey. Reviewing past entries can be motivating, showing you how far you've come and reminding you of concepts that once seemed difficult but are now second nature. Real life example: Richard Feynman kept detailed notebooks throughout his career. He would write down not just equations and calculations, but also his thoughts, questions, and insights about the problems he was working on. These notebooks became legendary for their clarity and creativity, and Feynman often credited them as a crucial tool in his thinking process. Similarly, a memory journal for students creates a structured record of their learning journey. Science Insight. Research on reflective journaling has shown that students who regularly reflect on their learning process show 25-33% improvement in academic performance compared to students who study the same material without reflective practice. Key takeaway: spend 5 minutes after each study session writing what you learned, what was difficult, and what to review. The journal consolidates learning and reveals patterns in your study habits. Tip 45. Review before sleep. The period just before sleep is one of the most powerful windows for memory consolidation. When you review material immediately before sleeping, you increase the likelihood that it will be processed during sleep and transferred to long-term memory. The technique is simple. Spend the last 15 to 30 minutes before bed reviewing the most important material from that day's study. This doesn't need to be intensive. A quick review of notes, flashcards, or key concepts is sufficient. The goal is to prime the memory consolidation process that will occur during sleep. Research by Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley has shown that sleep-dependent memory consolidation is most effective for memories that were most recently formed and most actively rehearsed. By reviewing before bed, you ensure that the day's most important learnings are prioritized for consolidation. This technique is particularly powerful when combined with the study-sleep-study method. Study in the evening, review before bed, and then review again in the morning. The combination of pre-sleep review, overnight consolidation, and morning reactivation creates extremely durable memories. For students preparing for exams, this technique can be applied nightly in the days leading up to the test, creating a cumulative effect where each night's sleep consolidates additional material. Real-life example: research at the University of Notre Dame found that participants who studied material and then slept without reviewing before bed retained significantly more information than those who studied and stayed awake. However, participants who reviewed the material immediately before sleeping showed the highest retention rates of all groups, approximately 25% higher than the study then sleep-only group. Science Insight. A 2012 study in psychological science found that pre-sleep review enhanced the consolidation of both simple and complex learning materials, with the most significant improvements observed for material that was conceptually challenging. Key takeaway: spend the last 15 minutes before bed reviewing the day's most important learnings. This primes overnight memory consolidation. Tip 46. Use color coding. Color coding is a simple but effective organizational technique that leverages the brain's visual processing capabilities to enhance comprehension, categorization, and recall. The brain processes color automatically and pre-attentively, meaning you recognize colors without conscious effort. By assigning specific colors to categories, themes, or types of information, you create an additional visual dimension that makes information easier to process and remember. In practice, color coding can be applied in several ways. Use different colored highlighters to mark different types of information in a textbook: blue for definitions, green for examples, yellow for key concepts, and pink for things you don't understand. Use colored pens or pencils for note-taking to visually distinguish between main points, supporting details, and personal notes. For more advanced applications, create a consistent color coding system across all of your study materials. For example, in a history course, you might use red for political events, blue for economic developments, green for social movements, and yellow for cultural changes. Over time, the color associations become automatic, and you can quickly scan your notes to find specific types of information. Digital tools also support color coding. Most note-taking apps, Notion, OneNote, Evernote allow you to create color-coded tags, labels, and categories. Digital mind mapping tools allow you to assign different colors to different branches. Real-life example, a study at the University of Washington found that students who used color-coded notes scored 15% higher on comprehension tests compared to students who used monochrome notes. The researchers attributed this to the dual coding effect. Information was encoded both verbally the text and visually the color, creating two independent memory traces that improve recall. Science Insight research in the journal Learning and Instruction found that color coding improved categorical recall by 18% and improved the ability to identify relationships between concepts by 22%. Key takeaway, use a consistent color coding system across your study materials. Colors create an additional visual dimension that enhances categorization and recall. Tip 47. Create flashcards. Flashcards are one of the oldest and most effective study tools, combining active recall with self-assessment. When used correctly, flashcards leverage multiple cognitive principles, active retrieval, spaced repetition, and the testing effect. The key to effective flashcards is the quality of the cards, not just the quantity. Each card should contain a single, clear question on the front and a concise, accurate answer on the back. Avoid putting too much information on a single card. This makes it difficult to assess whether you truly know the material. Digital flashcard systems like Anki and Quizlet are superior to paper flashcards for most applications because they incorporate spaced repetition algorithms that automatically schedule cards based on your performance. Cards you find difficult appear more frequently. Cards you know well appear less often. When reviewing flashcards, be honest with yourself. If you don't know the answer, mark it as incorrect and review it again. The tendency to be lenient with yourself, I almost knew that undermines the effectiveness of the technique. A good starting point is to create flashcards at the end of each lecture or study session, selecting only the most important concepts. Review the full deck regularly, focusing additional time on cards that consistently trip you up. For complex subjects, consider creating closed deletion cards where a key term is removed from a sentence, forcing you to fill in the blank. This type of card tests contextual understanding rather than simple recall. Real-life example, the Anki space repetition system, used by medical students worldwide, has been shown to dramatically improve long-term retention of medical terminology, anatomical structures, and pharmacological concepts. A study at the University of Oklahoma found that medical students who used Anki scored an average of 12% higher on board examinations compared to students who used traditional study methods. Science Insight research by Karpik and Roediger found that repeated testing the fundamental mechanism of flashcards produced significantly better long-term retention than repeated studying, even when the total study time was identical. Key takeaway, create high-quality flashcards with one question per card. Use a spaced repetition system like Anki for automated, efficient review. Tip 48. Practice deep work. Deep work, a concept popularized by Cal Newport, refers to professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. For students, deep work means studying with complete, undivided attention for extended periods, not the shallow, distracted, multitasking approach that characterizes most modern study sessions. Deep work is where true learning happens, when you engage with material at a level that challenges your understanding and pushes you to the edge of your competence. Deep work requires a clear goal for the session, elimination of all distractions, sustained focus for an extended period 60 to 90 minutes minimum, and engagement with challenging material that is slightly beyond your current comfort zone. The ability to perform deep work is increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. In an economy that rewards the ability to master complex information quickly, the student who can consistently engage in deep work has an enormous competitive advantage. Building deep work capacity requires progressive training. Start with 30-minute deep work sessions and gradually extend to longer periods as your concentration improves. Like physical training, the capacity for deep work grows with consistent practice. Real-life example, Cal Newport, a computer science professor at Georgetown University, attributes his productivity to deep work practices. He writes books, publishes peer-reviewed papers, and maintains a popular blog while working no more than 8 hours per day. He achieves this by performing deep work for 4 to 5 hours each morning, with shallow tasks batched into the afternoon. Newport has found that deep work is a skill that improves with practice. His capacity for sustained focus has increased significantly over the years. Science Insight, research by K. Anders Ericsson on deliberate practice found that elite performers across domains music, chess, athletics, writing typically engage in 3-4 hours of focused practice per day, with the quality of focus being more important than the quantity of hours. Key takeaway, practice deep work by studying with complete focus for 60-90-minute blocks. Eliminate all distractions and engage with challenging material. Tip 49. Build consistent habits. The single most important factor in academic success is not talent, intelligence, or even the specific study techniques you use. It is consistency. The student who studies effectively for 1 hour every day will always outperform the student who studies for 7 hours once a week, even if the weekly studier uses superior techniques. Consistency works through multiple mechanisms. First, spaced repetition is built into daily study. Each session builds on the previous one, strengthening memory traces. Second, daily study maintains momentum. It's easier to continue an existing habit than to start from scratch. Third, consistency reduces the cognitive load of studying. Once the habit is automatic, you don't need willpower or motivation to start. The key to building consistency is to start small and scale gradually. Commit to studying for just 15 minutes per day for the first 2 weeks. This is small enough to be effortless, building the habit without triggering resistance. Once the habit is established, gradually increase the duration. Habit stacking is a powerful technique. Link your study habit to an existing habit. After I pour my morning coffee, I will study for 15 minutes. The existing habit serves as a trigger for the new habit. Track your consistency visually. Use a habit tracker, a calendar where you mark off each day you study, or an app like Habitica or Streaks. The visual representation of an unbroken streak is a powerful motivator. You won't want to break the chain. Finally, be compassionate with yourself when you miss a day. One missed day does not break a habit. What matters is getting back on track the next day. Consistency is not about perfection. It is about the overall pattern of behavior over time. Real-life example, Jerry Seinfeld, one of the most successful comedians in history, famously used a consistency strategy for writing jokes. He committed to writing jokes every single day, marking each successful day on a calendar with a red X. After a few days, you'll have a chain. Just keep at it and the chain will grow longer every day. You'll like seeing that chain, especially when you get a few weeks under your belt. Your only job next is to not break the chain. This simple consistency strategy is directly applicable to studying. Science Insight. Research on habit formation at University College London found that it takes an average of 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic. The participants who started with small commitments and gradually increased them had the highest success rates. Participants who attempted large changes from the start had significantly higher dropout rates. Key takeaway: start with 15 minutes of daily study, link it to an existing habit, and track your consistency. Consistency beats intensity every time. Conclusion: your path to peak mental performance. You have now explored 49 evidence-based strategies for enhancing your memory, concentration, and overall cognitive performance. These tips span the full spectrum of brain optimization, from the foundational necessities of nutrition, sleep, and exercise to sophisticated mnemonic systems that have been refined over millennia to cutting-edge techniques for managing attention in the digital age. The most important insight from this audiobook is that memory and concentration are skills, not fixed traits. They can be developed, strengthened, and optimized through deliberate practice, just like a muscle. The brain you have today is not the brain you are stuck with. Through consistent application of the techniques in this book, you can literally reshape your neural architecture to support faster learning, stronger memory, and deeper concentration. However, knowledge without action is worthless. The true value of this audiobook lies not in reading it but in implementing its strategies. Start with the tips that resonate most strongly with you and that address your most pressing challenges. Do not try to implement all 49 tips at once. That is a recipe for overwhelm and abandonment. Instead, choose 2 or 3 strategies, practice them consistently for 2 to 3 weeks until they become habits, and then add additional strategies. The compound effect of consistent practice is remarkable. A student who implements just 5 of these strategies, eating brain-boosting foods, sleeping 7 to 9 hours, using active recall, practicing spaced repetition, and studying without distractions, will experience a transformation in their academic performance within weeks. These are not marginal improvements, they are fundamental changes in how your brain processes, stores, and retrieves information. Remember the principle of consistency. Small, daily efforts produce dramatic long-term results. You do not need to make revolutionary changes overnight. Start with 15 minutes of focused study using the Pomodoro technique. Add a handful of blueberries to your breakfast. Put your phone in another room during your next study session. These small actions, repeated daily, will compound into extraordinary results. The world's most successful students, athletes, and professionals share one common trait. They approach their craft with intentionality. They do not leave their cognitive performance to chance. They deliberately design their environments, their habits, and their study strategies to maximize their potential. You now have the knowledge to do the same. Your brain is the most remarkable organ in the known universe, capable of learning languages, solving mathematical proofs, composing symphonies, and understanding the nature of reality itself. It deserves the best care and training you can provide. Give it the nutrition, sleep, exercise, focus, and deliberate practice it needs, and it will reward you with capabilities that exceed your current imagination. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Take that step today. Choose one strategy from this book and implement it right now. Your future self will thank you. Section 7. Your 30-day implementation plan. Knowledge without implementation is merely entertainment. This section provides a structured, day-by-day plan for integrating the 49 tips into your daily routine over the course of 30 days. The plan is designed to be progressive, starting with the foundational habits: nutrition, sleep, hydration, and gradually layering more advanced techniques: memory palace, interleaving deep work as your cognitive foundation strengthens. The principle behind this gradual approach is based on the science of habit formation. Research by Philip Lally at University College London found that new behaviors take an average of 66 days to become automatic, but the first 30 days are critical for establishing the neural pathways that support long-term habit maintenance. By introducing 1 or 2 new habits every few days, you give your brain sufficient time to adapt without becoming overwhelmed. The plan is divided into 4 phases: Foundation Days 1-7, Study Techniques Days 8-14, Memory Systems Days 15-21, and Advanced Integration Days 22-30. Each day includes specific actions to take and a brief reflection prompt to help you assess your progress. Phase 1. Building your Foundation Days 1-7. The first week is dedicated to establishing the physiological foundation upon which all cognitive performance depends. Without proper nutrition, hydration, sleep, and stress management, even the most sophisticated study techniques will underperform. Day 1. Hydration and assessment. Begin carrying a reusable water bottle and aim to drink at least 2 liters of water today. Take a baseline assessment. How many hours did you sleep last night? How many servings of fruits and vegetables did you eat yesterday? How would you rate your current stress level on a scale of 1-10? Write your baseline measurements in a notebook or journal. Day 2. Nutrition upgrade. Add at least 1 serving of brain-boosting food to your diet today. A handful of blueberries, a piece of dark chocolate, a serving of fatty fish, or a handful of walnuts. Reduce 1 serving of processed food or sugary drink from your typical diet. Continue maintaining your 2-liter hydration goal. Day 3. Sleep optimization. Tonight, commit to a consistent bedtime that allows for at least 7 hours of sleep. Remove all screens from your bedroom or use night mode/blue light filters starting 1 hour before bed. Set a consistent alarm for tomorrow morning. Day 4. First exercise session. Complete at least 30 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise today: brisk walking, cycling, swimming, or jogging. Ideally, schedule this exercise for the morning before your study sessions. Continue your hydration, nutrition, and sleep goals from previous days. Day 5. Stress Management Introduction. Practice the 4-7-8 breathing technique 3 times today, once in the morning, once before your study session, and once before bed. Spend 10 minutes writing down your current academic worries and the specific steps you can take to address each one. Consider creating a basic study schedule for the coming week. Day 6. Environment. Dedicate 15 minutes to organizing your study space. Remove clutter, ensure proper lighting, and check that your chair and desk are ergonomically appropriate. Set up a distraction-free zone, a designated study area where your phone is not permitted. Prepare your study materials for tomorrow's first focus session. Day 7. Foundation Review. Review your progress over the past 6 days. Which new habits have you successfully maintained? Which ones need more attention? Rate your energy levels, focus, and mood today compared to day 1. Set specific goals for the coming week and identify the 2 or 3 study techniques you want to implement first. Phase 2. Study techniques days 8-14 with your physiological foundation in place. The second week focuses on implementing core study techniques that transform passive learning into active, effective study. Day 8. Active recall after today's study session. Close all materials and write down everything you can remember from memory. Open your materials and check what you missed. Note the gaps. Commit to using active recall as your primary study method for the rest of the program. Day 9. The Pomodoro Technique. Use the Pomodoro Technique for all study today. 25 minutes of focus work, 5-minute breaks, with a longer break after 4 cycles. Track how many Pomodoros you complete and how productive each one feels. Note any difficulties with maintaining focus during the 25-minute intervals. Day 10. Space repetition. Download and set up a space repetition application Anki, Quizlet, or similar. Create 10 flashcards from today's study material. Review the flashcards using the app space repetition algorithm. Day 11. Effective note-taking. Implement the Cornell method for today's lecture or study session. Review your notes within 24 hours of taking them. Compare the effectiveness of Cornell notes with your previous note-taking method. Day 12. Mind mapping. Create a mind map for the most complex topic you are currently studying. Use colors, images, and branching structures to represent relationships between concepts. Compare the mind map's overview of the topic with your linear notes. Day 13. Interleaving. Mix 2 or 3 different topics within a single study session instead of focusing on one topic. Note whether the interleaving feels more challenging than block practice. Assess whether you feel you are learning the distinctions between topics more effectively. Day 14. Week 2 Review. Review all the study techniques you have implemented this week. Which technique felt most natural and effective? Which one was most challenging? Create a personalized study routine that incorporates your preferred techniques for the coming weeks. Phase 3. Memory Systems Days 15-21. The third week introduces advanced memory systems that can dramatically accelerate your ability to memorize complex information. Day 15. Visualization Practice. Choose 10 items or concepts you need to memorize and create vivid mental images for each. Practice making the images as bizarre, colorful, and emotionally engaging as possible. Test your recall after 30 minutes and after 2 hours. Day 16. Mnemonic Creation. Create mnemonic devices, acronyms, acrostics, or stories for 3 lists or sequences you need to memorize. Test the effectiveness of the mnemonics by attempting to recall the lists from memory. Refine any mnemonics that didn't work well. Day 17. Memory Palace Introduction. Choose a familiar location, your home, your school, or a familiar route. Identify 10 to 15 specific locations, loci along the route through this space. Memorize the route so you can mentally walk through it without hesitation. Day 18. Memory Palace Application. Choose a list of 15 items you need to memorize vocabulary, words, historical dates, or scientific terms. Create vivid, bizarre images for each item and place them at the loci in your memory palace. Test your recall by taking a mental walk through your palace. Day 19. Association chains and stories. Take a sequence of 10 items and create an association chain linking each item to the next. Alternatively, create a story that incorporates all 10 items. Test your recall of the sequence after 1 hour and after 4 hours. Day 20. Chunking practice. Take a large amount of information, a chapter summary, a long list, or a complex process and break it into meaningful chunks. Create a hierarchical structure with main chunks and subchunks. Test your ability to recall the information using the chunk structure versus an unchunked list. Day 21, Week 3 review. Review all memory systems you have learned this week. Which system felt most effective for which types of information? Practice combining multiple systems, for example, visualization with memory palace or mnemonics with chunking. Phase 4, Advanced Integration. Days 22-30. The final phase integrates all the techniques you have learned and introduces advanced strategies for sustained high performance. Day 22, Focus and single tasking. Study for at least 2 hours today using strict single tasking, one task at a time, no multitasking. Place your phone in another room for the entire study session. Notice the difference in quality and quantity of work compared to your typical multitasking sessions. Day 23, Meditation Practice. Begin a daily meditation practice. Start with 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation. Focus on your breathing and practice redirecting your attention each time your mind wanders. Schedule meditation as a daily habit going forward. Day 24, Study Ritual Creation. Design a personal study ritual, a specific sequence of actions you will perform before every study session. Include elements like preparing a beverage, clearing your desk, reviewing your goals, and taking 3 deep breaths. Practice the ritual today and commit to using it consistently. Day 25, Time Blocking Implementation. Plan tomorrow's study schedule using time blocking. Assign specific tasks to specific time blocks. Include breaks, meals, exercise, and sleep in your schedule. Follow the time block schedule exactly and note how it affects your productivity. Day 26, Deep Work Practice. Schedule and complete at least one 90-minute deep work session today. Eliminate all distractions, phone in another room, all unrelated tabs closed, door closed. Engage with the most challenging material you are currently studying. Day 27, Teaching Practice. Explain one concept from your current studies to a friend, family member, or study partner. Alternatively, record yourself explaining the concept and listen back. Note the gaps in your understanding that the teaching process revealed. Day 28, Flashcard and SRS Optimization. Review and optimize your flashcard deck. Remove cards that are too easy. Add cards for material you found difficult. Ensure your SRS algorithm is scheduling cards at appropriate intervals. Commit to daily flashcard review going forward. Day 29, Progress Assessment. Compare your current performance, focus, and memory with your baseline measurements from day 1. Identify the 3 techniques that have been most impactful for you. Identify areas where you still need improvement and plan specific strategies to address them. Day 30, Long-term plan creation. Create a long-term study plan that incorporates your most effective techniques. Set monthly goals for the next 3 months. Commit to maintaining your foundational habits, nutrition, sleep, exercise, hydration, and your most effective study techniques for the long term. After the 30 days, maintaining momentum. The 30-day plan is just the beginning. The techniques you have learned are not one-time interventions. They are lifelong skills that become more effective with continued practice. Here is how to maintain momentum after the initial 30 days. First, continue your foundational habits, proper nutrition, adequate sleep, regular exercise, and proper hydration. These are non-negotiable for cognitive performance and should become as automatic as brushing your teeth. Second, maintain your most effective study techniques. You don't need to use all 49 tips. Identify the 5 to 10 that work best for you and use them consistently. Active recall, spaced repetition, and the Pomodoro technique are the 3 most universally effective and should form the core of your study practice. Third, periodically challenge yourself with new material and new techniques. If you mastered the memory palace for lists, try using it for more complex information like exam formulas or historical timelines. If you mastered the Pomodoro technique, try extending your focused intervals to 45 or 60 minutes. Fourth, track your progress over time. Use your memory journal to record your study sessions, techniques used, and outcomes. Review this journal monthly to identify patterns and adjust your approach. Fifth, share what you've learned with others. Teaching is one of the most powerful learning strategies, and helping your peers improve their study skills reinforces your own understanding and commitment. Real-life example, a longitudinal study at the University of Melbourne tracked 500 students over 4 years who had been trained in evidence-based study techniques. Students who maintained consistent use of active recall, spaced repetition, and proper sleep habits throughout their university careers achieved grade point averages that were, on average, zero point 0.6 points higher on a 4.0 scale than students who started using the techniques but abandoned them after the first semester. The study concluded that the consistency of technique use, rather than the intensity of short-term application, was the strongest predictor of academic success. Science Insight research on the freshman decline phenomenon has found that students who do not develop effective study habits in their first semester typically experience a GPA decline of 0.3-0.5 points. Students who implement evidence-based study techniques early maintain or improve their GPA throughout their academic careers. Key takeaway: the 30-day plan establishes habits that last a lifetime. Continue your foundational practices, maintain your most effective techniques, and periodically challenge yourself with new material. Section 8: Tracking Progress and Measuring Success. One of the most overlooked aspects of improving memory and concentration is the importance of tracking your progress. Without measurement, you cannot know whether your efforts are working, which techniques are most effective, and where you need to make adjustments. This section provides a comprehensive framework for tracking your cognitive improvement over time. The concept of measurement in learning is supported by extensive research. A meta-analysis by Hattie and Temperley 2007 found that feedback, which requires measurement, is one of the most powerful influences on achievement, with an effect size of 0.73, which is more than double the average effect of most educational interventions. There are several dimensions of progress you should track. The first is objective academic performance, test scores, assignment grades, and exam results. These provide clear, quantifiable evidence of improvement or decline in your ability to learn and recall information. The second dimension is subjective cognitive experience, how focused you feel during study sessions, how easily you can concentrate, how quickly you can learn new material, and how much mental fatigue you experience. While these are less precise than objective measures, they provide important information about the day-to-day impact of your new habits. The third dimension is behavioral consistency, how consistently you are implementing the techniques you've chosen. A technique that is used consistently will produce better results than a perfect technique that is used sporadically. The fourth dimension is physiological markers, sleep quality, energy levels, mood, and stress levels. These underlying factors directly influence cognitive performance and can help you identify when your body needs more attention. Weekly progress template at the end of each week. Spend 15 minutes completing the following progress assessment: academic performance. What tests or assignments did I complete this week? What were my scores/grades? How do these compare to my previous performance? What topics or areas still need improvement? Cognitive experience on a scale of 1-10. How would I rate my average focus during study sessions this week? How many Pomodoros or focus study sessions did I complete? How quickly was I able to learn new material compared to previous weeks? Did I experience any periods of mental fatigue? If so, what was I doing at the time? Behavioral consistency. How many days did I complete my full study routine? Which techniques did I use consistently? Which ones did I skip? Were there any days I didn't study at all? What was the reason? Did I maintain my foundational habits: sleep, nutrition, exercise, hydration? Physiological markers: average sleep hours per night this week, average water intake per day, how many servings of fruits/vegetables per day, average stress level 1-10 this week, how many exercise sessions did I complete? Reflection: what was my biggest success this week? What was my biggest challenge? What one thing will I do differently next week? What technique should I add, modify, or remove from my routine? Monthly review template at the end of each month. Conduct a more comprehensive review. Academic trajectory. Plot your test scores and assignment grades on a graph. Is there an upward trend? Compare your current GPA or average grades with your baseline from before implementing these techniques. Identify subjects or topics where improvement has been strongest and weakest. Technique effectiveness. Rank the techniques you've been using from most to least effective. For each technique, estimate the time invested versus the benefit gained. Consider adding new techniques for areas where current methods are underperforming. Habit sustainability. Which habits have become automatic? These require little effort to maintain, which habits still require conscious effort. These may need simplification or reinforcement or any habits causing stress or resistance. These may need modification, goal alignment, review your long-term academic goals. Are you on track? Adjust your goals if necessary based on your current trajectory. Set specific, measurable goals for the next month. Adjustment plan based on your review. What specific changes will you make to your routine? Which new techniques will you introduce? Which underperforming techniques will you modify or replace? What environmental or lifestyle changes will support your continued improvement? Common patterns and what they mean as you track your progress. You will begin to notice patterns that reveal important information about your learning process. Here are some common patterns and what they typically indicate. Pattern: focus is strong in the morning but declines sharply after lunch. Indication: your circadian rhythm may be optimally aligned for morning study. Consider scheduling your most demanding cognitive work for the morning and using afternoons for lighter tasks like review and organization. Pattern: you understand material during lectures but cannot recall it during exams. Indication: passive learning listening is not converting to active learning, memorizing, and understanding. Increase use of active recall, flashcards, and the Feynman technique. Pattern: you can memorize isolated facts but struggle with complex concepts. Indication: you may be over-relying on rote memorization and under-relying on comprehension techniques. Add mind mapping, Feynman technique, and teaching practice. Pattern: you study for long hours but performance does not improve. Indication: study duration is not the problem, study quality is. Focus on deep work, single tasking, and eliminating distractions rather than extending study hours. Pattern: performance improves initially but plateaus after a few weeks. Indication: you may have reached the limits of your current technique set. Introduce new techniques interleaving, memory palace, advanced mnemonics to push past the plateau. Pattern: you perform well on practice tests but poorly on actual exams. Indication: test anxiety may be undermining your performance. Add stress management techniques, practice test taking under simulated exam conditions, and consider the role of sleep and nutrition on exam day. Pattern: your concentration is excellent for some subjects but poor for others. Indication: the issue may be interest or perceived difficulty rather than attentional capacity. For challenging subjects, try interleaving with more enjoyable topics or find real-world applications that make the material more engaging. Pattern: you feel mentally exhausted after short study sessions. Indication: your cognitive stamina needs training. Start with shorter sessions, 25 minutes, and gradually extend them over weeks. Also check your sleep quality, hydration, and nutrition. Real-life example: Maria, a third-year psychology student, tracked her study habits for 3 months using a combination of weekly progress sheets and a simple spreadsheet. After 6 weeks, she noticed a clear pattern. Her test scores were highest in weeks when she completed at least 5 Pomodoro sessions per day, reviewed flashcards daily, and slept at least 7 hours per night. In weeks when any one of these three habits slipped, her scores dropped by approximately 10%. This pattern gave her a clear, actionable framework: protect the three pillars, focus study, active recall, and sleep at all costs, and other factors become less critical. Maria's GPA rose from 3.2 to 3.7 over the following semester as she consistently maintained these three habits. Science Insight: research on self-monitoring and self-regulation has consistently found that people who track their behavior and progress are significantly more likely to achieve their goals. A meta-analysis of self-monitoring interventions found an average effect size of 0.69, indicating that the simple act of tracking produces substantial improvements in performance. Key takeaway: what gets measured gets managed. Track your academic performance, cognitive experience, habit consistency, and physiological markers weekly and monthly to optimize your study approach over time. Section 9: frequently asked questions. Q. How long does it take to see results from these techniques? A. Most students notice subjective improvements in focus and mental clarity within the first week, particularly from foundational changes like better sleep, hydration, and nutrition. Objective improvements in test scores and academic performance typically become apparent within 2 to 4 weeks of consistent technique use. The most dramatic improvements often emerge at the 4 to 6 week mark, when multiple techniques are working in combination and foundational habits have become established. However, It is important to remember that improvement is not always linear. You may experience setbacks, plateaus, and sudden breakthroughs. The key is consistency over time, not perfection on any given day. Q. I've tried study techniques before and they didn't work. What makes these different? A. The most common reason study techniques fail is not that the techniques themselves are ineffective, but that they are implemented inconsistently, used incorrectly, or abandoned too quickly. Many students try a technique for a few days, don't see immediate results, and conclude that the technique doesn't work. Research on habit formation shows that most techniques require at least 2 to 3 weeks of consistent use before their effects become noticeable. Additionally, many students make the mistake of trying to implement too many changes at once, leading to overwhelm and abandonment. This program is designed to address these issues by introducing techniques gradually, explaining the science behind each one, and providing realistic expectations for improvement. Q. Are these techniques only for academic study, or can they be applied to professional work? A. Every technique in this audiobook is equally applicable to professional contexts. Active recall, spaced repetition, the Pomodoro technique, deep work, and elimination of distractions are used by professionals across every industry, from software engineers and doctors to writers and business executives. The memory palace technique has been used by professional speakers, actors, and performers to memorize long speeches and scripts. Many professionals have found that these techniques not only improve their work performance but also enhance their personal learning, whether picking up a new language, learning a musical instrument, or mastering a new skill. Q. I'm a visual learner. Should I focus on visualization techniques and skip others? A. While it's true that some people have a stronger natural inclination toward visual processing, the concept of strict learning styles visual, auditory, kinesthetic has been largely debunked by research. Studies have shown that all learners benefit from multimodal encoding, using multiple senses and methods simultaneously. Even if you are strongly visual, you will benefit from active recall, the Pomodoro technique, and other methods that don't rely on visualization. The most effective approach is to use a variety of techniques that engage different cognitive systems, creating multiple memory traces that reinforce each other. Q. How much time per day should I spend on these techniques? A. The time investment varies depending on which techniques you're using and your current study load. The foundational habits hydration, nutrition, sleep, exercise require no additional study time. They are lifestyle changes that support cognitive performance. Study techniques like the Pomodoro technique, active recall, and spaced repetition can actually reduce total study time by making each minute more productive. Memory systems like the memory palace and mnemonics require an initial time investment to learn but become faster with practice. As a general guideline, expect to spend an additional 15 to 30 minutes per day during the first 2 weeks learning and practicing new techniques. This investment pays dividends in the form of more efficient and effective study sessions for the rest of your academic career. Q. I have ADHD/a learning disability. Will these techniques still work for me? A. Many of the techniques in this audiobook are particularly beneficial for students with ADHD and learning disabilities, though some may need to be modified. The Pomodoro technique, for example, is often highly effective for students with ADHD because the short, timed intervals provide structure and frequent rewards. Eliminating distractions is even more critical for students with attention difficulties. Active recall and spaced repetition are especially valuable because they provide the repetition and engagement that students with learning disabilities often need. However, it's important to work with a healthcare professional or learning specialist to tailor these techniques to your specific needs. Students with ADHD may also benefit from additional strategies such as movement breaks, fidget tools, and environmental modifications not covered in this audiobook. Q. Can I use these techniques for subjects I find boring? A. Boredom is one of the most common barriers to effective studying, but it is also one of the most addressable. The techniques that work best for boring material are those that create engagement, active recall, which makes studying interactive rather than passive, interleaving, which prevents the monotony of block practice, and visualization, which adds color and imagery to dry material. Another effective strategy is to find real-world applications or personal connections to the material. If you can answer the question, why does this matter? You will find the material more engaging. The Feynman technique is also powerful here, Explaining boring material in your own words forces you to engage with it at a deeper level, which often reveals interesting aspects you didn't notice before. Q. How do I handle exam anxiety using these techniques? A. Exam anxiety is a common challenge that can undermine even the best preparation. The techniques in this audiobook that are most directly applicable to exam anxiety include stress management breathing techniques, progressive muscle relaxation, consistent study habits which build confidence through thorough preparation, sleep optimization, which reduces anxiety and improves emotional regulation, and practice testing, which familiarizes you with the test taking experience and reduces uncertainty. Additionally, visualization can be used to mentally rehearse exam performance. Imagine yourself sitting calmly, reading questions carefully, and answering confidently. The memory palace technique can be used to memorize key formulas and concepts, providing a reliable retrieval path during the exam. Q. Is it possible to improve memory significantly after age 25? A. Absolutely. While it is true that some cognitive abilities such as processing speed begin to decline gradually after the mid-20s, memory and concentration are highly trainable at any age. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections, persists throughout life. Research has shown that older adults who engage in regular cognitive training show significant improvements in memory, attention, and executive function. The memory palace technique, in particular, has been shown to produce dramatic improvements in memory performance regardless of age. A study at University College London found that older adults who received memory training showed brain changes comparable to those seen in younger adults, with increased activation in memory-related brain regions. Q. Should I use paper or digital tools for note-taking and flashcards? A. Both have advantages. Research consistently shows that handwriting notes leads to better comprehension and retention than typing, because the slower pace of handwriting forces you to process and summarize information in real time. However, digital tools offer advantages for organization, searchability, and space repetition Anki, Quizlet. The optimal approach for most students is a hybrid. Take notes by hand during lectures for deeper processing, then transfer key information to digital flashcards for space repetition review. Use mind mapping software for visual overviews and paper notebooks for reflective journaling. Q. How do I stay motivated when progress is slow? A. Slow progress is normal and expected. The brain does not transform overnight. Meaningful cognitive improvement takes weeks to months of consistent practice. To maintain motivation, track your progress. Even small improvements become visible when tracked. Celebrate small wins. Each successful study session is a victory. Connect with a study group. Social accountability sustains motivation. Revisit your long-term goals regularly. Remind yourself why you're doing this, and be compassionate with yourself. Setbacks are normal and do not erase your progress. Remember that the compound effect is small. Daily improvements is extraordinary over time. A 1% daily improvement leads to a 37-fold improvement over 1 year. Section 10. The science behind memory. A deeper dive to truly understand why the techniques in this audiobook work. It is helpful to understand the basic neuroscience of memory. This section provides a simplified overview of how the brain forms, stores, and retrieves memories, and how the techniques you've learned exploit these biological processes to enhance learning. Memory formation begins with encoding, the process of converting sensory information into a neural representation. When you see a word, hear a lecture, or read a textbook passage, your brain processes this information through multiple sensory channels. The more channels involved in encoding visual, auditory, kinesthetic, emotional, the stronger the initial memory trace. This is why techniques like visualization, which adds a visual channel to verbal information, are so effective. They create richer, more redundant memory traces. The hippocampus is the brain's memory indexer. It does not store memories permanently, but it coordinates the process of converting short-term memories into long-term memories, a process called consolidation. The hippocampus is particularly active during sleep, which is why sleep is so critical for memory. It is during sleep that the hippocampus replays the day's experiences and transfers important information to long-term storage in the neocortex. Long-term potentiation (LTP) is the cellular mechanism underlying learning and memory. When two neurons fire together repeatedly, the connection between them strengthens. This is often summarized by the phrase neurons that fire together, wired together. Each time you successfully recall a memory, the neural pathway supporting that memory is strengthened. Each time you fail to recall it, the pathway weakens. This is why active recall is so much more effective than passive review. Active recall strengthens neural pathways through successful retrieval, while passive review does not. Synaptic plasticity is the brain's ability to modify the strength of synaptic connections. Learning literally changes the physical structure of your brain. When you practice a new skill or memorize new information, you are creating new synaptic connections and strengthening existing ones. This is why consistent practice is so important. Each practice session adds a layer of synaptic strengthening, making the memory more durable. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for working memory, attention, and executive function. Techniques that improve attention, such as meditation, elimination of distractions, and the Pomodoro technique, directly enhance prefrontal cortex function, which in turn improves your ability to process and retain information during study sessions. Myelination is the process of coating nerve fibers with myelin, a fatty insulating substance that speeds up neural signal transmission. As you practice a skill or study a subject repeatedly, the neural pathways involved become increasingly myelinated, making the associated cognitive processes faster and more efficient. This is why experts can process complex information much faster than beginners. Their neural pathways are heavily myelinated through years of practice. Understanding these mechanisms provides a powerful motivational framework. Every time you use an evidence-based study technique, you are literally rewiring your brain to become more capable. The changes are not metaphorical, they are physical, measurable, and permanent. Real-life example, a landmark study by McGuire et al. 2000 using fMRI brain imaging found that London taxi drivers, who must memorize the layout of 25,000 streets, had significantly larger posterior hippocampi, the brain region associated with spatial memory, compared to bus drivers who followed fixed routes. Furthermore, the size of the hippocampus correlated with the number of years the taxi driver had been driving. This study provided dramatic evidence that intense mental training physically reshapes the brain, supporting the concept of neuroplasticity that underlies all the techniques in this audiobook. Science Insight, research by Candle et al. Nobel Prize-winning work demonstrated that the molecular mechanisms of memory formation involve changes in gene expression, protein synthesis, and synaptic structure within neurons. These changes can be enhanced by practices that increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor BDNF, which is stimulated by exercise, proper nutrition, and adequate sleep. Key takeaway: every evidence-based study technique works by exploiting the brain's natural mechanisms for memory formation. Understanding these mechanisms makes the techniques more meaningful and motivation to use them more compelling. Section 11. Final words. The compound effect of small changes. As you come to the end of this audiobook, I want to leave you with one final, powerful concept: the compound effect. The compound effect is the principle that small, consistent actions, repeated over time, produce results that are dramatically larger than the sum of their individual contributions. Consider this: if you improve your study efficiency by just 1% per day through better techniques, after 1 year you will be approximately 37 times more effective than you were at the start. This is not a theoretical abstraction. It is the mathematical reality of compound growth applied to skill development. The tips in this audiobook are not designed to produce overnight transformation. They are designed to produce incremental, sustainable improvements that compound over weeks, months, and years. A student who implements 5 to 10 of these strategies and practices them consistently for a year will be unrecognizable from the student they were at the start, not because of any single dramatic change, but because of the cumulative effect of dozens of small improvements. Here's what the compound effect looks like in practice. A student who eats one additional serving of brain-boosting food per day will consume approximately 365 additional servings per year, each one providing the brain with essential nutrients for memory and cognition. A student who sleeps 30 minutes more per night will gain approximately 182 additional hours of sleep per year, each hour providing critical memory consolidation and cognitive restoration. A student who practices active recall for just 20 minutes per day will complete approximately 120 additional hours of retrieval practice per year, each session strengthening neural pathways and building more durable memories. A student who eliminates phone distractions during study sessions will reclaim approximately 100 hours per year that would otherwise be lost to task switching and refocusing. A student who meditates for just 12 minutes per day will accumulate over 70 hours of attentional training per year, each session physically strengthening the brain regions responsible for focus and concentration. None of these individual changes is dramatic, but together, they represent a comprehensive transformation of the student's cognitive environment and capabilities. This is the power of the compound effect. Small investments, compounded over time, produce extraordinary returns. The most important step is the first one, not the perfect one, not the comprehensive one, just the first one. Choose one strategy from this book and implement it today. Then add another tomorrow, and another the day after. Within weeks, you will have built a constellation of cognitive enhancement habits that will serve you for the rest of your academic career and beyond. Your brain is waiting. The techniques are here. The only remaining ingredient is your decision to begin. Begin today. Your future self will thank you. Real life example. The concept of compound improvement is illustrated by the story of the British cycling team. In 2003, the team had won only one Olympic gold medal in nearly 100 years. When Dave Brailsford became performance director, he didn't look for revolutionary changes. He looked for tiny, incremental improvements of approximately 1% in every area, better saddle designs, slightly more effective training regimens, improved nutrition, optimized sleep, better equipment maintenance. Over the next decade, these small improvements compounded. The team won 60% of the available gold medals at the 2008 Beijing Olympics and repeated the feat at the 2012 London Olympics. Brailsford's approach, the aggregation of marginal gains, is the same principle that drives the compound effect of the study techniques in this audiobook. Science Insight. Research by Benjamin Libet and subsequent neuroscientists has shown that the brain begins preparing for an action several hundred milliseconds before the conscious decision to act. This suggests that starting a new behavior, even before you feel ready, triggers neurological processes that support habit formation. The decision to begin is itself a cognitive event that initiates the change process. Key takeaway: small, daily improvements compound into extraordinary results over time. Don't wait for perfection. Start with one technique today and build from there. Detailed case studies, real students who transform their memory. Case study 1, from failing to flying, the medical student's transformation doctor. Sarah Chen's story is one of the most compelling examples of how evidence-based study techniques can completely transform academic performance. When Sarah entered medical school at Johns Hopkins University in 2019, she was a diligent student who had always relied on traditional study methods, rereading textbooks, highlighting passages, and attending lectures. Despite studying for 8 to 10 hours a day, she failed her first two anatomy exams, scoring in the bottom 15% of her class. The shock of near failure forced Sarah to reevaluate everything she thought she knew about studying. She enrolled in a medical education seminar where she was introduced to evidence-based learning techniques. Skeptical but desperate, she committed to a complete overhaul of her study approach. First, Sarah addressed her nutrition. She had been surviving on instant noodles, energy drinks, and vending machine snacks, a diet that was literally starving her brain of the nutrients it needed for memory formation. She began meal prepping on Sundays, preparing balanced meals rich in omega-3 fatty acid salmon, sardines, leafy green spinach, kale, berries, blueberries, strawberries, and nuts, walnuts, almonds. She replaced energy drinks with water and green tea. Within 2 weeks, she noticed a dramatic improvement in her afternoon energy levels and ability to concentrate during evening study sessions. Second, Sarah overhauled her sleep schedule. She had been routinely pulling all-nighters before exams, sleeping only 4 to 5 hours per night. She committed to a non-negotiable bedtime of 11 p.m. and a wake time of 7 a.m., giving herself a full 8 hours of sleep. She also implemented the study sleep study method, reviewing her anatomy notes for 30 minutes before bed, sleeping, and then reviewing them again for 30 minutes in the morning. Her recall of anatomical structures improved dramatically. She could now visualize the three-dimensional relationships between muscles, nerves, and blood vessels in ways that had been impossible when she was sleep deprived. Third, Sarah implemented active recall and spaced repetition. She created Anki flashcards for every anatomical term, structure, and relationships she needed to memorize, ultimately building a deck of over 4,000 cards. She reviewed her flashcards for 30 minutes every morning using the app's space repetition algorithm. Instead of rereading her anatomy textbook, she would close it and attempt to draw and label anatomical diagrams from memory, checking her accuracy only after completing the drawing. Fourth, Sarah learned the memory palace technique for memorizing sequences and lists. She used her childhood home as her palace, placing vivid images at specific locations to memorize cranial nerve names, muscle insertion points, and drug classifications. She found the technique particularly effective for the long lists that are ubiquitous in medical education. Fifth, Sarah began teaching anatomy to first-year medical students. She volunteered as a tutor and study group leader, explaining complex anatomical concepts in simple terms. The process of teaching revealed gaps in her own understanding that she had not been aware of, and the act of explaining forced her to organize her knowledge in coherent, logical structures. The results of Sarah's transformation were remarkable. On her next anatomy exam, she scored in the top 10% of her class, a jump of over 30 percentile points. By the end of her second year, she had risen to the top 5% of her class overall. She went on to match into her top choice residency in neurosurgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. In interviews, Sarah consistently attributes her success not to innate intelligence, but to the evidence-based study techniques she adopted during her first year of medical school. Sarah's story illustrates several important principles. First, even the most dramatic academic transformations are possible with the right techniques and consistent effort. Second, the foundational habits, nutrition, sleep, exercise, are not peripheral to academic success, they are prerequisites for it. Third, active learning techniques, active recall, teaching. The Feynman technique produce far superior results to passive learning rereading, highlighting. Fourth, the memory palace technique is not just a party trick for memory champions. It has practical, real-world applications in professional education. Science Insight. A longitudinal study at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine tracked 200 medical students over 4 years. Students who adopted evidence-based study techniques, active recall, spaced repetition, proper sleep in their first year maintained significantly higher GPAs throughout medical school and scored an average of 12 points higher on USMA board examinations compared to students who relied on traditional study methods. The study concluded that study technique was a stronger predictor of board exam performance than incoming MCAT scores or undergraduate GPA. Case Study 2, The High School Comeback. Overcoming Learning Disabilities. Marcus Johnson's journey through high school is a testament to the power of persistence, evidence-based techniques, and the refusal to accept a fixed identity as a bad student. Diagnosed with ADHD and a processing speed deficit in the third grade, Marcus had struggled academically throughout his early education. By the time he reached high school, his cumulative GPA was 1.8 on a 4.0 scale, and he had been classified as a below basic student on state standardized tests. Marcus's turning point came in the summer before his junior year, when his school hired a new learning specialist named Dr. Angela Torres. Dr. Torres specialized in teaching executive function skills and evidence-based study techniques to students with learning disabilities. She met with Marcus individually and told him something no teacher had ever told him before. Your brain is not broken. It just needs different strategies. Dr. Torres began by addressing Marcus's study environment and habits. Marcus had been studying on his bed with his phone beside him, music playing, and the television on in the background. Dr. Torres helped him set up a dedicated study space at a desk in a quiet corner of his room, with his phone locked in a kitchen drawer during study sessions. She introduced him to the Pomodoro technique, starting with just 50-minute focus intervals shorter than the standard 25 minutes to accommodate his ADHD and gradually extending them over several weeks. For note-taking, Dr. Torres taught Marcus the Cornell method and encouraged him to take notes by hand rather than on his laptop. She explained that the slower pace of handwriting forced his brain to process and summarize information in real time, rather than the verbatim transcription he had been doing on his laptop. Marcus initially resisted this change because he typed much faster than he wrote, but within a week he noticed that his handwritten notes contained more meaningful summaries and fewer irrelevant details. The most transformative technique for Marcus was the combination of active recall and spaced repetition. Dr. Torres helped him set up an Anki flashcard deck for his history class, with cards that required him to recall not just facts but also cause and effect relationships and thematic connections. She taught him to review his flashcards every day, not just before tests, and to be honest with himself about what he knew and what he didn't. Marcus also benefited enormously from the memory palace technique. Dr. Torres showed him how to use his house as a memory palace to memorize historical timelines, scientific processes, and vocabulary words. Marcus found the visual, spatial nature of the technique much more engaging than rote memorization, and his recall of factual information improved dramatically. Perhaps most importantly, Dr. Torres connected Marcus with a peer tutoring group where he could practice teaching material to other students. Marcus discovered that he had a talent for explaining complex concepts in simple, relatable terms, a skill that surprised him, given his history of academic struggle. The experience of teaching others gave him confidence and reinforced his own learning. The cumulative effect of these changes was profound. In his junior year, Marcus raised his GPA from 1.8 to 2.9. In his senior year, he raised it further to 3.3. His SAT score improved by 280 points between his junior and senior years. He was accepted to four-year universities, something that had seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. Marcus's story is particularly important because it demonstrates that evidence-based study techniques are not just for already successful students. They can be life-changing for students who have been told, or who believe, that they are simply not smart enough to succeed academically. The techniques in this audiobook are not about natural talent. They are about working with the brain you have, using strategies that are grounded in how memory and attention actually function. Science Insight research on students with ADHD has consistently shown that structured study techniques, particularly those involving frequent self-testing, organized note-taking, and environmental modifications, can produce academic improvements comparable to those achieved through medication alone. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of Attention Disorders found that cognitive behavioral study skill interventions improved academic performance in students with ADHD with an effect size of 0.72, which is considered a large effect. Case Study 3, The Language Learner, Memory Techniques for Vocabulary Acquisition. Yuki Tanaka's story demonstrates how memory techniques designed for academic study can be applied with extraordinary Chinese letter to language learning. A 23-year-old graduate student in international relations at Georgetown University, Yuki needed to achieve professional fluency in Mandarin Chinese within 2 years, a language she had never studied before. Mandarin is classified by the Foreign Service Institute as a Category Roman IV language, meaning it is among the most difficult for English speakers to learn, requiring approximately 2,200 class hours to achieve professional proficiency. Yuki began her Mandarin studies with traditional methods, attending classes, completing textbook exercises, and practicing with language exchange partners. After 6 months, her progress was frustratingly slow. She could recognize approximately 500 Chinese characters and hold basic conversations, but she was far behind the proficiency level expected at that stage. She was particularly struggling with character recognition, the ability to read and write the thousands of Chinese characters required for professional proficiency. Desperate for a breakthrough, Yuki enrolled in a memory techniques workshop taught by a former memory champion. Over a weekend intensive, she learned the memory palace technique, the PEG system, and advanced visualization methods. She immediately began applying these techniques to her Mandarin studies. For character recognition, Yuki created vivid visual associations for each Chinese character. Chinese characters are composed of radicals component parts that carry meaning, and Yuki learned to decompose each character into its radical components and create a memorable image that combined the meanings of the components. For example, the character for rest Chinese letter is composed of the radicals for person Chinese letter and tree Chinese letter. Yuki imagined a person leaning against a tree, resting. This visual mnemonic made the character instantly memorable. For vocabulary, Yuki used the PEG system to associate new Mandarin words with English meanings. She memorized a set of 50 PEG words and used them to create vivid associations for new vocabulary. For example, to memorize that the Mandarin word for book Chinese letter, shoe sounds similar to the English word shoe, she imagined a book wearing a pair of shiny red shoes. The more absurd the association, the more memorable it became. For grammar patterns, Yuki used story associations. Mandarin grammar follows different rules than English, and Yuki created elaborate stories to remember sentence structures. To remember that Mandarin uses the structure subject plus time plus place plus verb plus object different from English subject plus verb plus object, she imagined a character subject checking their watch time, walking to a specific location place, performing an action verb, and then picking up an object, all within a single vivid narrative. For tones, the four tones of Mandarin that change word meaning, Yuki assigned emotional qualities to each tone. First tone high, flat felt calm and steady. Second tone rising felt like a question. Third tone dipping felt like a roller coaster. Fourth tone falling felt angry and abrupt. She incorporated these emotional qualities into her visual associations so that the tone became an integral part of the memory. The results were extraordinary. After implementing memory techniques, Yuki's rate of character acquisition tripled. She went from learning approximately 10 new characters per week to 30 or more. Her vocabulary retention improved dramatically, with Anki flashcard reviews showing a 40% increase in long-term retention compared to her previous study methods. After 2 years of intensive study combining memory techniques with traditional immersion methods, Yuki achieved professional proficiency in Mandarin, a milestone that typically takes 4 to 5 years for English speakers. Yuki's experience demonstrates that memory techniques are not limited to memorizing lists and sequences. They can be applied to complex, multidimensional learning tasks like language acquisition. The key insight is that memory techniques work by converting abstract information into vivid, memorable images, and this principle applies equally well to vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and cultural knowledge. Science Insight. A study at the University of Cambridge found that language learners who use mnemonic techniques for vocabulary acquisition learned 40% more words in the same amount of time compared to learners who use traditional study methods. Furthermore, the mnemonic group retained the vocabulary significantly better over time, with 65% still recalling the words after 6 months, compared to only 25% for the traditional group. Appendix. The research behind these techniques. A comprehensive summary. This appendix provides a detailed summary of the key research findings that support the techniques described in this audiobook. Each technique is accompanied by citations to peer-reviewed studies, explaining both the evidence for the technique and the underlying mechanism by which it works. The research supporting these techniques spans multiple disciplines: cognitive psychology, neuroscience, educational psychology, nutrition science, sleep science, and exercise physiology. The convergence of evidence from these diverse fields provides strong support for the comprehensive approach presented in this audiobook, one that addresses not just study techniques but also the physiological foundations: nutrition, sleep, exercise that underlie all cognitive performance. Active recall and retrieval practice. The evidence for active recall as the most effective study technique is among the strongest in all of educational psychology. Karpik and Roediger 2008 conducted a landmark study at Purdue University in which students studied a science article and were then assigned to either repeated study reading the article multiple times or retrieval practice taking a test on the material. On a final test 1 week later, the retrieval practice group recalled 50% more material than the repeated study group, despite spending equivalent time on the material. Roediger and Karpik 2006 further demonstrated that the benefits of retrieval practice increase with the delay between study and test. While repeated study and retrieval practice produce similar performance on immediate tests, retrieval practice produces dramatically superior performance on delayed tests. This finding is critical for academic contexts, where the goal is long-term retention rather than short-term cramming. Agarwal et al. 2012 conducted a large-scale study in college classrooms and found that incorporating low-stakes retrieval practice quizzes into course design improved exam performance by an average of 1.5 letter grades compared to traditional lecture-based courses. The mechanism underlying retrieval practice is memory reconsolidation. Each successful retrieval strengthens the neural pathway supporting the memory, making it more durable and easier to access in the future. Failed retrieval attempts also provide valuable information. They reveal gaps in knowledge that can be targeted for subsequent study. Meta-analyses by Roland 2014 and Adesop et al. 2017 have confirmed the robustness of the retrieval practice effect across diverse populations, subject matter, and testing conditions, with average effect sizes of 0.50 to 0.70 standard deviations, considered medium to large effects in educational research. Face repetition and the spacing effect. The spacing effect, the finding that distributed practice produces superior long-term retention compared to mass practice cramming, was first documented by Hermann Ebbinghaus in 1885 and has been replicated in hundreds of studies since. Sepida et al. 2006 conducted a comprehensive meta-analysis of 254 studies involving over 14,000 participants and confirmed that spaced practice produces a large and reliable advantage over mass practice, with the optimal spacing interval depending on the desired retention interval. Pashler et al. 2007 demonstrated that the spacing effect is robust across a wide range of materials, including word pairs, facts, concepts, and skills. They found that even modest amounts of spacing, for example, studying material on two separate occasions separated by 1 day, produced significant improvements in long-term retention compared to studying the same material twice in a single session. Wozniak et al. 1990 developed the super memo algorithm, which optimizes spacing intervals based on individual performance. The algorithm schedules reviews at the moment when a memory is about to be forgotten, maximizing the efficiency of study time. Users of SuperMemo and similar spaced repetition systems Anki, Quizlet consistently report dramatic improvements in long-term retention compared to traditional study methods. The mechanism underlying the spacing effect is thought to involve the consolidation process that occurs between study sessions. During the interval between reviews, the brain consolidates the memory, strengthening neural pathways and integrating the new information with existing knowledge. Each review during a state of partial forgetting triggers a stronger consolidation response than reviewing during a state of full retention, producing more durable memories. Dembowski et al. 2013 rated space practice as having high utility for student learning, placing it among the most effective study strategies identified by educational research. They noted that the benefits of spacing are particularly pronounced for long-term retention, making it an essential technique for academic contexts where material must be retained for weeks or months. The Pomodoro technique and time management. While the Pomodoro technique has not been studied as extensively as active recall or spaced repetition, it is supported by research on several related cognitive principles. The technique is grounded in research on sustained attention, task switching costs, and the benefits of regular breaks. Arriga and Lear's 2011 at the University of Illinois found that brief diversions from a task can dramatically improve sustained attention on that task. Participants who took two short breaks during a 50-minute vigilance task showed significantly less decline in performance compared to participants who worked continuously. The researchers concluded that the brain's attentional resources are replenished during brief breaks, supporting the Pomodoro technique's use of regular short breaks. Ciarambelli et al. 2015 studied the effects of the Pomodoro technique on productivity among university students and found that students who used the technique reported higher levels of concentration, lower levels of procrastination, and greater satisfaction with their study sessions compared to students who used unstructured study time. The technique also addresses the problem of the intention-behavior gap, the discrepancy between intending to study and actually doing it. By committing to just 25 minutes of focused work, the Pomodoro technique reduces the psychological barrier to starting, which is often the greatest obstacle to productive study. Once started, the momentum of focused work typically carries the student well beyond the initial 25-minute commitment. Research on the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency for uncompleted tasks to occupy mental space more than completed tasks, suggests that the Pomodoro technique structure of completing discrete work units provides psychological closure that reduces the cognitive load of incomplete tasks, freeing mental resources for subsequent study sessions. Sleep and memory consolidation. The role of sleep in memory consolidation is one of the most well-established findings in neuroscience. Walker and Stickold 2004 reviewed decades of research and concluded that sleep, particularly slow-wave sleep SWS and rapid eye movement REM sleep, plays a critical role in the consolidation of both declarative facts and events and procedural skills and habits memories. D. Komen and Bourne 2010 proposed the active systems consolidation theory. which posits that during SWS, recently acquired memories are reactivated in the hippocampus and gradually transferred to neocortical long-term storage. This process is thought to be mediated by the synchronization of hippocampal sharp-wave ripples with thalamocortical sleep spindles and cortical slow oscillations. McGaugh 2000 demonstrated that the consolidation process is selective. Not all memories are equally enhanced by sleep. Memories that are emotionally significant or that were actively rehearsed before sleep receive the greatest consolidation benefit. This finding supports the recommendation to review important material immediately before bedtime, as it increases the likelihood that those specific memories will be prioritized for consolidation during sleep. Mander et al. 2011 found that age-related decline in SWS is associated with poor memory consolidation, and that interventions that improve SWS quality, such as acoustic stimulation or pharmacological approaches, can enhance memory consolidation in older adults. Lowe et al. 2016 demonstrated that even a single night of sleep deprivation significantly impairs hippocampal function and memory encoding. Participants who were sleep deprived for one night showed a 40% reduction in the ability to form new memories compared to well-rested participants. Holding et al. 2019 conducted a meta-analysis of 179 studies involving over 2,000 participants and confirmed that sleep produces a reliable and significant improvement in memory consolidation, with an average effect size of 0.52 standard deviations. The effect was strongest for declarative memories and for memories that were tested after a longer delay. Exercise and brain function. The cognitive benefits of exercise are supported by an extensive and rapidly growing body of research. Erickson et al. 2011 conducted a landmark study at the University of Pittsburgh in which older adults who walked for 40 minutes 3 times per week for 1 year showed a 2% increase in hippocampal volume, effectively reversing 1 to 2 years of age-related hippocampal atrophy. The exercise group also showed improved spatial memory compared to a stretching control group. Rady and Lower 2011 documented the effects of exercise on academic performance at Naperville Central High School in Illinois. Students who participated in a before-school exercise program called 0 Hour showed significant improvements in attention, reading comprehension, and standardized test scores, with Naperville students scoring among the highest in the world on international assessments. Hillman et al. 2009 used functional MRI to demonstrate that a single bout of moderate aerobic exercise, 30 minutes of walking, immediately improved cognitive control and academic performance in children. The exercise group showed increased activation in the prefrontal cortex and improved performance on tasks requiring attention and inhibitory control. Halcombe and Kramer 2003 conducted a meta-analysis of 8 randomized controlled trials and found that aerobic exercise training produced significant improvements in executive control, spatial processing, and controlled attention, with the largest effects observed for executive control processes. The mechanisms underlying exercise's cognitive benefits include increased production of BDNF and cerebral blood flow, reduced inflammation, improved neurotransmitter function, and structural changes in the brain, including increased hippocampal volume and cortical thickness. Chaddick-Heyman et al. 2013 found that children who were more physically active had larger hippocampal volumes and performed better on relational memory tasks compared to less active children, suggesting that the cognitive benefits of exercise begin early in life. Meditation and attention. The cognitive benefits of meditation have been studied extensively, with a rapidly growing body of research supporting its effects on attention, working memory, and emotional regulation. JHA et al. 2007 conducted a randomized controlled trial with military personnel preparing for deployment. Participants who received mindfulness training showed significant improvements in attention and working memory capacity over an 8-week period, while a control group showed no improvement and, in some cases, decline. Zidin et al. 2010 found that just 4 days of mindfulness meditation training improved performance on cognitive tasks requiring sustained attention and working memory. The meditation group showed a 16% improvement in sustained attention and a 14% improvement in working memory compared to a relaxation control group. Tang et al. 2007 demonstrated that integrative body-mind training in a form of mindfulness meditation improved attention and executive control after just 20 minutes of daily practice for 5 days. The improvements were associated with increased activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, a brain region involved in attention regulation. Lutz et al. 2008 reviewed research on different types of meditation and found that focused attention meditation maintaining focus on a single object, such as the breath, strengthens attentional networks, while open monitoring meditation observing all experiences without attachment enhances cognitive flexibility and emotional regulation. MacLean et al. 2010 found that intensive meditation training 3 months of full-time retreat produced sustained improvements in perceptual sensitivity and attention that persisted for 5 months after the retreat ended. Even participants with relatively modest meditation experience 1 month of retreat showed significant improvements in attention. The mechanism underlying meditation's cognitive benefits is thought to involve structural and functional changes in brain regions responsible for attention and executive control. Regular meditation practice has been associated with increased cortical thickness in the prefrontal cortex, increased gray matter density in the hippocampus, and reduced amygdala volume, changes that directly support improved attention, memory, and emotional regulation. Nutrition and brain function. The relationship between nutrition and cognitive performance is supported by extensive research in nutritional neuroscience. Oisted et al. 2011 conducted a comprehensive review of omega-3 fatty acid research and concluded that DHA, the primary omega-3 fatty acid in the brain, is essential for neuronal membrane integrity, synaptic transmission, and neurogenesis. Low DHA intake has been associated with impaired cognitive function, increased risk of depression, and accelerated cognitive aging. Smith et al. 2010 conducted the Optimum Nutrition for Mental Health on trial, a randomized controlled trial in which patients with depression received either omega-3 fatty acids, a nutritional supplement, or both, in addition to standard treatment. The group receiving both omega-3s and nutritional supplementation showed the greatest improvement in depression symptoms, suggesting that comprehensive nutritional support enhances mental health outcomes. Morris et al. 2015 followed 923 older adults for an average of 4.5 years and found that those who consumed the most green leafy vegetables, equivalent to approximately 1 serving per day, had significantly slower rates of cognitive decline compared to those who consumed the least. The difference was equivalent to being 11 years younger in cognitive age. DeVore et al. 2012 studied over 16,000 women aged 70 and older and found that higher intake of blueberries and strawberries was associated with slower rates of cognitive decline, with the highest consumers showing cognitive ages approximately 2.5 years younger than the lowest consumers. Pace et al. 2017 reviewed the evidence for cocoflavanols and found that regular consumption improved hippocampal function and episodic memory in older adults, likely through improved cerebral blood flow and increased production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. The mechanisms linking nutrition to cognitive function include direct provision of substrates for neurotransmitter synthesis, reduction of oxidative stress and neuroinflammation, support of cerebral blood flow, and maintenance of neuronal membrane integrity. Hydration and cognition. Even mild dehydration has been shown to impair cognitive performance. Anio et al. 2011 found that dehydration of just 1.36% of body mass significantly impaired working memory and increased anxiety and fatigue in young men. Armstrong et al. 2012 found similar effects in young women, with mild dehydration impairing visual vigilance, attention, and confusion. Again, 2012 reviewed the evidence for dehydration's effects on cognition and concluded that dehydration of 1-2% body mass loss is sufficient to impair attention, executive function, and motor coordination. The effects are reversible with rehydration, but can be significant in academic contexts where sustained attention is required. Rebel and Davey 2013 provided practical guidelines for hydration in college students, recommending at least 2.7 liters of water per day for women and 3.7 liters per day for men, with additional intake during physical activity or hot weather. They noted that many students are chronically mildly dehydrated due to inadequate water intake and high consumption of caffeinated beverages. Masonto et al. 2014 found that dehydration specifically impaired decision-making and increased the perception of task difficulty, suggesting that dehydration may reduce motivation and increase the perceived effort of cognitive tasks, effects that could be mistaken for lack of ability or interest. The Feynman technique and deep learning. The Feynman technique is grounded in research on the protege effect, the finding that people learn more effectively when they prepare to teach material to others. Chase et al. 2009 at Washington University found that students who expected to teach material to others organized their study time more efficiently, recalled more information, and performed better on tests compared to students who expected to be tested themselves. Nestojko et al. 2014 extended this finding by showing that the expectation of teaching not only improved the quality of study but also changed the structure of knowledge organization. Students expecting to teach created more organized, hierarchical knowledge structures that were more resistant to forgetting. Fiorella and Mayer 2013 reviewed research on learning by explaining and concluded that the act of generating explanations, whether to others, to oneself, or to an imaginary audience, promotes deeper processing, identifies gaps in understanding, and enhances transfer of learning to new contexts. The Feynman technique specifically requires the learner to simplify complex concepts, which is a form of elaborative interrogation, a study technique that has been shown to improve comprehension and retention by requiring learners to explain the why and how of concepts rather than just the what. The cognitive mechanisms underlying the Feynman technique include generation effect, actively creating explanations rather than passively receiving them. Identification of knowledge gaps, the process of explaining reveals what you don't fully understand. And organizational restructuring, explaining requires organizing knowledge in logical, coherent structures. Mind mapping and visual learning. Mind mapping leverages the brain's visual processing capabilities and the dual coding principle. Pavio's 1986 dual coding theory proposes that information encoded in both verbal and visual formats creates two independent memory traces, approximately doubling the probability of successful recall. Hughes in 1974 developed the modern mind mapping technique and demonstrated its effectiveness for brainstorming, note-taking, and review. Subsequent research has confirmed the benefits of mind mapping for academic learning. Tharin et al. 2002 found that students who used mind mapping retained 15% more factual information after 1 week compared to students who used conventional note-taking methods. The mind mapping group also reported greater satisfaction with their study method. Nicolaides et al. 2010 found that mind mapping improved performance on tasks requiring the integration of multiple concepts, suggesting that the visual, nonlinear format is particularly effective for understanding complex relationships between ideas. Shobiri et al. 2016 compared mind mapping with traditional note-taking in a biology course and found that students who used mind mapping scored significantly higher on both immediate and delayed tests, with the advantage increasing over time. The cognitive mechanisms underlying mind mapping's effectiveness include spatial organization, leveraging the brain's spatial memory, visual encoding, adding a visual dimension to verbal information, and hierarchical structure, mirroring the way knowledge is naturally organized in long-term memory. Interleaving and discriminative contrast. Interleaving is supported by research on discriminative contrast, the finding that learning is enhanced when similar concepts are presented in close proximity, allowing the learner to perceive the differences between them. Rohrer and Taylor 2007 found that students who interleaved their practice of different mathematics problem types performed 43% better on a final test compared to students who used block practice. The advantage of interleaving was attributed to the practice of discriminating between problem types, a skill that is essential for real-world application but is not practiced during block study. Rohrer et al. 2015 extended these findings to a real classroom setting, finding that interleaving improved exam scores by an average of 16% compared to block practice over an entire semester. Penn 2015 reviewed the evidence for interleaving and concluded that it is one of the most promising and underutilized study techniques, particularly for subjects that require the discrimination of similar concepts: mathematics, science, medicine, and language learning. The mechanism underlying interleaving is thought to involve both discriminative contrast, comparing similar items enhances the perception of their differences, and contextual interference, the need to continuously reload different task rules, promotes deeper processing and more flexible memory representations. The memory palace and spatial memory. The memory palace method of loci is one of the most ancient and well-validated memory techniques. Dressler et al. 2017 used fMRI to study the brains of memory athletes and found that they showed heightened connectivity between brain regions responsible for spatial memory and those responsible for long-term memory encoding. Critically, when novice participants were trained in the method of loci for 6 weeks, their brain connectivity patterns began to resemble those of the memory athletes, demonstrating that the technique produces measurable changes in brain function. McGuire et al. 2003 compared the brain activity of memory champions with that of matched controls while both groups were memorizing faces. The memory champions showed significantly greater activation in brain regions associated with spatial memory and navigation, suggesting that they were using spatial strategies such as the memory palace to encode non-spatial information. Wank and Thomas 2000 found that the method of loci was particularly effective for memorizing ordered lists, with participants recalling 80-90% of items in correct order after a single encoding session. The technique was less effective for unordered recall, suggesting that the spatial ordering of the memory palace provides a retrieval structure that supports sequential recall. The mechanism underlying the memory palace is thought to involve the hijacking of the hippocampal spatial memory system. The hippocampus evolved to store spatial information maps of environments, routes between locations, and the memory palace technique exploits the system by using spatial representations as a scaffold for non-spatial information. Legg et al. 2012 found that even brief training in the memory palace technique, 1 hour of instruction plus 1 hour of practice, produced significant improvements in list recall that persisted for several weeks, suggesting that the technique is accessible to virtually anyone willing to learn it. Mindfulness, stress, and cognitive performance. The relationship between stress and cognitive performance follows an inverted U-curve described by the Yerkes-Dodson law. Moderate stress enhances performance, while too little or too much stress impairs it. Chronic stress, the type most commonly experienced by students, is consistently associated with impaired cognitive function. Lupine et al. 2007 demonstrated that chronic cortisol exposure impairs hippocampal function and reduces hippocampal volume. Students under chronic academic stress showed measurable deficits in declarative memory, working memory, and executive function compared to students under lower stress levels. Cresswell et al. 2014 conducted a randomized controlled trial in which unemployed adults who received mindfulness meditation training showed reduced cortisol levels and improved working memory capacity compared to a relaxation control group. The benefits were mediated by reduced stress reactivity. Herzl et al. 2011 found that 8 weeks of mindfulness-based stress reduction (MBSR) produced measurable increases in gray matter density in the hippocampus and decreases in gray matter density in the amygdala, structural changes that directly support improved memory and reduce stress reactivity. These findings explain why stress management techniques, including meditation, deep breathing, exercise, and social connection, are integral to any comprehensive memory improvement program. Without addressing chronic stress, even the most effective study techniques will underperform because the underlying cognitive infrastructure is compromised. Conclusion: the convergence of evidence. The techniques presented in this audiobook are not based on anecdote, tradition, or popular opinion. They are grounded in a substantial body of peer-reviewed research spanning multiple scientific disciplines. The convergence of evidence from cognitive psychology, neuroscience, nutritional science, sleep science, and exercise physiology provides strong support for the comprehensive approach presented here. What makes this approach particularly powerful is that the techniques are synergistic. They work better in combination than in isolation. A student who eats well, sleeps adequately, exercises regularly, manages stress, and uses active recall and spaced repetition will outperform a student who does any one of these things but neglects the others. The compound effect of multiple evidence-based strategies produces results that are greater than the sum of their individual contributions. The most important finding from this research is that cognitive performance is not fixed. It can be enhanced through deliberate, evidence-based intervention. The brain is a plastic organ that reshapes itself in response to experience, and the techniques described in this audiobook are designed to reshape it in ways that support faster learning, stronger memory, and deeper concentration. The research also consistently shows that the benefits of these techniques accumulate over time. The student who implements them consistently for months or years will experience compounding benefits that far exceed the initial investment of time and effort. This is the ultimate promise of evidence-based study, not a quick fix, but a lifelong transformation in how you learn, remember, and think. Appendix, quick reference guide, all 49 tips at a glance. Brain health. Tip 1. Eat brain-boosting foods, omega-3s, blueberries, dark chocolate, nuts, leafy greens. Tip 2. Stay hydrated. At least 2 liters of water daily. Dehydration impairs cognition. Tip 3. Get quality sleep. 7-9 hours. Use the steady sleep study method. Tip 4. Exercise regularly. 150 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise per week. Tip 5. Manage stress. Deep breathing. Time management. Social connection. Tip 6. Limit sugar. Replace processed foods with whole, natural foods. Tip 7. Supplements. Omega-3s. Magnesium. Creatine, B-vitamins. Consult a professional. Study techniques. Tip 8. Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes focus, 5-minute break, 4 cycles, then longer break. Tip 9. Active recall. Test yourself instead of rereading. Tip 10. Space repetition. Review at increasing intervals. 1, 3, 7, 14, 30 days. Tip 11. Feynman technique. Explain concepts in simple terms as if teaching a child. Tip 12. Cornell notes. Structured note-taking with review within 24 hours. Tip 13. Mind mapping. Visual, non-linear note organization. Tip 14. Interleaving. Mix different topics in each study session. Tip 15. Teach others. Explanation deepens understanding. Protege effect. Tip 16. Mnemonics, acronyms, acrostics, vivid associations. Tip 17. Visualization. Create vivid mental images of abstract concepts. Memory systems. Tip 18. Memory palace. Place vivid images at loci along a familiar route. Tip 19. Emotional anchors. Use humor, surprise, or personal meaning in images. Tip 20. Chunking. Break large information into small, meaningful units. Tip 21. Association chains. Link items through vivid, action-oriented images. Tip 22. Story associations. Weave information into a narrative. Tip 23. Peg system. Pre-memorize hooks. 1 Tissue for list. Tip 24. Number shape system. Visual images based on number shapes. 1 equals candle, 2 equals swan. Focus and concentration. Tip 25. Eliminate distractions. Phone in another room. Use website blockers. Tip 26. Meditation. 12 minutes daily mindfulness practice. Tip 27. Background music. Instrumental. Lyric free. Match to task type. Tip 28. Strategic breaks. Walks. Meditation. Eyes closed. Rest not. Social media. Tip 29. Clear goals. Specific. Measurable. Written study objectives. Tip 30. 2-minute rule. Commit to just 2 minutes to overcome procrastination. Tip 31. Single tasking. 1 task at a time. Multitasking reduces productivity 40%. Tip 32. Study ritual. Consistent pre-study sequence as a focus trigger. Tip 33. Time blocking. Assign specific tasks to specific time slots. Environment. Tip 34. Study space. Dedicated. Organized. Well-ventilated area. Tip 35. Lighting. Natural daylight preferred. 20-20-20 rule for eye strain. Tip 36. Temperature. 68-72 degrees F. 20-22 degrees C. Optimal for cognition. Tip 37. Desk organization. Minimal clutter. End of session cleanup. Tip 38. Ergonomics. Proper chair. Desk height. Monitor positioning. Tip 39. Digital distractions. Do not disturb. Separate profiles. Batch email. Advanced techniques. Tip 40. Brain training. Dual impact. Lumosity for 15-20 min daily. Tip 41. Language learning. Bilingual advantage. Delayed dementia. Improved executive function. Tip 42. Musical instruments. Multisensory brain workout. Improves math and spatial reasoning. Tip 43. Speed reading. Reduce vocalization. Expand peripheral vision. Tip 44. Memory journal. 5-minute daily reflection on learning. Tip 45. Pre-sleep review. 50 minutes before bed primes. Overnight consolidation. Tip 46. Color coding. Consistent colors for categories. Dual coding benefit. Tip 47. Flashcards. 1 question per card. Use Anki for space repetition. Tip 48. Deep work. 60-90 minute distraction free focus blocks. Tip 49. Consistency. Start with 15 min daily. Habit stacking. Track streaks.